The entire trading post erupted in laughter when the mountain outlaw paid her debt and asked her to marry him. Clara Whitmore, the fat, ugly kitchen girl nobody wanted, was supposed to refuse. She was supposed to know her place. Instead, she said yes, packed her filthy belongings, and rode into the deadliest mountains in Montana Territory, beside a man everyone feared. The townspeople bet she'd be back within a week, begging for scraps. They were wrong. What happened in those frozen peaks changed everything. If you want to know how the woman everyone ignored became a frontier legend, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far the story travels. The winter of 1881 hit Montana Territory like a fist wrapped in ice. Wind screamed down from the northern peaks, carrying snow that cut exposed skin and turned breath into white clouds that vanished before they fully formed. In the settlement of Black Hollow Pass, barely 20 buildings huddled together against the wilderness, people learned to move quickly between structures, heads down, bodies bent against the cold that could kill a person in less than an hour. Inside Mackenzie's trading post, the largest building in Black Hollow, Clara Whitmore knelt beside a cast iron stove, scrubbing grease from a pot with hands so raw they bled into the grey water. The main room stretched behind her, rough wooden floor, shelves stocked with supplies, a counter where Samuel Mackenzie conducted business. 15 people crowded near the stove, drinking whiskey and coffee, their voices loud and careless. Clara kept her head down. She'd learned that lesson months ago. "Jesus, that's a big girl," someone muttered, not bothering to lower their voice. "How much you reckon she weighs?" Laughter rippled through the group. Clara's hands didn't stop moving. Scrub, rinse, scrub again. The pot had held stew 3 days ago, and the burned bits clung to the metal like they'd been welded there. 200 pounds if she's an ounce, another voice added. Maybe 250. Built like a damn ox. More laughter. Clara was 24 years old. She'd been working at Mackenzie's trading post for 7 months, ever since a wagon boss named Terence Quill sold her labor contract to Samuel Mackenzie for $42. The contract was supposed to cover her passage west from Ohio. Instead, it became a trap. Quill had lied about the terms. The work was supposed to last 3 months. The contract said 3 years. By the time Clara discovered the deception, Quill had vanished into the territories, and Mackenzie held papers that looked legitimate enough for a frontier settlement where law was mostly theoretical. So Clara scrubbed pots, hauled water, chopped vegetables, cleaned floors, washed linens, whatever Mackenzie demanded. The work itself didn't bother her. Growing up poor in Ohio had taught her that work was just work. You did it or you starved. What wore on her was the constant mockery. The comments about her size, her plain face, her silence, the way people looked through her like she was furniture. "Hey, Clara!" Mackenzie's voice cut through the noise. "Get more coffee going. These folks are thirsty." Clara stood slowly, her knees aching from kneeling on the hard floor. She was tall, taller than most women, nearly 6 feet, and broad-shouldered, with a frame built for hard labor rather than the delicate features men seemed to value. Her face was plain, everyone agreed on that, too square, nose too prominent, mouth too wide, hair the color of mud, pulled back in a braid so tight it made her scalp hurt. She moved toward the counter where Mackenzie kept the coffee supplies, and someone stuck a boot out. Clara saw it coming. She'd seen it before, but the pot was still in her hands, heavy and wet, and when she tried to sidestep, her foot caught the edge of the boot anyway. She went down hard. The pot hit the floor with a clang that silenced every conversation. Water spread across the wooden planks. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Then the laughter started. It rolled through the room like thunder, harsh, cruel, the kind of laughter that had nothing to do with humor and everything to do with cruelty, finding an acceptable target. Clara pushed herself up slowly. Water soaked through her dress, the same dress she'd been wearing for 2 weeks because it was the only one she owned that still held together. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, from rage so hot and helpless it made her teeth ache. Clumsy bitch, the man who tripped her said. He was grinning, mid-30s, beard streaked with tobacco stains, eyes bright with meanness. You okay down there? Need help getting your fat ass up? More laughter. Clara didn't answer. She picked up the pot, stood, and walked to the counter. Her face burned. Her hand shook harder, but she kept moving because stopping would make it worse. Clara, Mackenzie said, his voice edged with annoyance. Clean that up before someone slips. She nodded once. Behind her, the conversations resumed. The mockery faded into background noise, jokes about her size, speculation about whether she'd ever find a husband, crude comments about what kind of man would be desperate enough to touch her. Clara had heard it all before, every word, every variation. She made coffee with mechanical precision, ground the beans, boiled water, measured carefully because Mackenzie got angry when she wasted supplies. While the coffee brewed, she found rags and mopped up the water from the floor, ignoring the boots that deliberately stepped into the wet spots to make her job harder. This was her life now. 7 months of this. 2 years and 5 months remaining on the contract. Sometimes, late at night when the trading post was quiet and she lay on the thin pallet Mackenzie allowed her in the storage room, Clara thought about running, just walking out into the snow and disappearing into the wilderness. But she knew she wouldn't survive. She had no supplies, no money, no skills for frontier survival. Running meant dying, and Clara Whitmore wasn't ready to die. Not yet. So she stayed. Scrubbed pots, took the mockery, became invisible. The afternoon dragged on. The storm outside intensified, wind rattling the shutters. More people arrived, shaking snow from their coats and crowding around the stove. The trading post became loud with conversation, the air thick with smoke and the smell of unwashed bodies. Clara served coffee, refilled cups, stayed quiet. Around 3 o'clock, the door opened again, bringing a blast of freezing air that made everyone curse. "Shut the damn door!" someone shouted. The man who entered didn't hurry. He stepped inside slowly, deliberately, and closed the door behind him, with a control that felt almost dangerous. Snow covered his shoulders and the brim of his hat. Ice clung to his beard. The conversations died. Clara was refilling a cup near the counter when she felt the shift, the way the entire room suddenly paid attention to the newcomer. She looked up. The man was tall, maybe 6'2", with a build that suggested strength without bulk. His coat was weathered leather and fur, well made but worn from hard use. He carried a rifle slung across his back and a knife on his belt that looked more like a small sword. His face was hard to read beneath the beard, somewhere between 35 and 45, with eyes that moved across the room like he was cataloguing threats. "Vance," Mackenzie said. His voice had changed. Less authority, more caution. "Didn't expect to see you down from the high country." The man, Vance, brushed snow from his shoulders. "Need supplies?" Sure. Mackenzie moved behind the counter quickly. "What are you looking for?" Clara knew the name. Everyone in Black Hollow Pass knew about Elias Vance. He lived somewhere high in the Bitter Ridge Mountains, days of hard travel from the settlement. A trapper and hunter who came down maybe twice a year for supplies, paid in gold and furs, and never stayed longer than necessary. Some people said he used to be an outlaw. Others claimed he'd killed men. The stories varied, but they all agreed on one thing. Elias Vance was someone you didn't cross. While Mackenzie pulled together supplies, Clara returned to the stove. She had pots to scrub, and staring at dangerous mountain men wouldn't change that. But when she knelt beside the stove again, she felt something. Someone watching her. She glanced up. Elias Vance was looking directly at her, not through her, not past her, at her. His eyes were grey, the colour of storm clouds. They met hers across the crowded room, and for 3 seconds that felt much longer. Neither of them looked away. Then Clara dropped her gaze back to the pot in her hands, her heart suddenly beating too fast. Nobody looked at her like that, like she existed. She told herself she'd imagined it. Men like Elias Vance didn't notice women like Clara Whitmore. That was just how the world worked. She focused on scrubbing. Behind her, someone spoke up, a young woman named Rebecca Sharp, daughter of the local assayer. Pretty girl, blonde hair, small waist, the kind of woman men wrote songs about. "Mr. Vance," Rebecca said, her voice syrupy sweet, "I heard you brought down a grizzly last month. Is that true?" "It's true," Vance said. His voice was deep, roughened by weather and disuse. "That must have been so dangerous." Bear was old, half-starved, wasn't much of a fight. Rebecca laughed, like he'd said something charming. "Still, you're very brave." Clara kept scrubbing. The conversation behind her continued. Rebecca asking questions, Vance giving short answers that didn't encourage more talk. Other people joined in, the pretty girls and ambitious young men trying to get the attention of the famous mountain man. Vance's answers got shorter, then stopped. "Mackenzie," he said, cutting through the chatter. "Who's the woman by the stove?" The room went silent. Clara's hand stopped moving. "That?" Mackenzie laughed. "That's Clara, kitchen help. Nothing special." "She work for you?" "Got her contract, 3 years, minus what she's already served." "Why?" Clara's heart hammered. She didn't turn around, didn't move. "What's the contract worth?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Mackenzie was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was cautious. "Well now, that depends. You looking to buy?" "Asking the price." "She owes $42 plus interest and board. Call it $60 total." Clara's breath stopped. $60. She'd been working 7 months, and according to Mackenzie's calculations, which he'd shown her exactly once, she'd barely paid down $10 of the debt. "I'll give you 75, Vance said. "Cash, right now." The room erupted, people talking over each other, voices rising. Someone laughed. Rebecca Sharp made a sound of pure disbelief. Clara slowly turned around. Elias Vance was still looking at her. Not at Rebecca, not at the other woman in the room, at Clara. "You serious?" Mackenzie said. "Dead serious." "Why the hell would you—" Mackenzie stopped himself. "I mean, no offense, but Clara's not exactly— She's a hard worker, I'll give you that, but— $75, Vance repeated. "Do we have a deal or not?" Mackenzie's face went through several expressions. Confusion, calculation, greed. Yeah, we got a deal." Vance reached into his coat and pulled out a leather pouch. He counted out coins onto the counter, gold eagles that clinked against the wood. $75. More money than Clara had ever seen in one place. The entire time his eyes kept returning to Clara. When the money was counted, Vance turned fully toward her. "You got a say in this?" Clara's mouth was dry. "What?" "You got a say," he repeated. "I just bought your contract from Mackenzie, but I'm not a slaver and I'm not interested in owning another person, so here's the deal. You can stay here and keep working for Mackenzie if that's what you want, or you can come with me." "Come with you where?" The question came out barely louder than a whisper. "The mountains, my cabin. I need a wife." Someone in the room laughed, then several people, then half the room was laughing. "You're joking," Rebecca Sharp said. "You're actually joking, right?" Vance didn't look at her. "I'm not joking. I'm offering a partnership. Life up there is hard, brutal. Most people can't handle it, but I think you can." Clara stared at him. "You don't know anything about me." "I know enough." "Based on what? You walked in here 10 minutes ago." "Based on watching you take shit from these people without breaking." His voice was quiet, but carried across the silent room. "Based on how your hands are bleeding from work, but you haven't complained once. Based on the fact that you're still standing here instead of running away or giving up." The laughter had stopped. Now people were just watching, mouths open. "This is insane," Mackenzie said. "It's a choice," Vance said, still looking at Clara. "Your choice. You want to stay here and scrub pots for 2 more years. That's fine. You want something different, I'm offering it. But I'm not going to lie to you. Life in the mountains is harder than anything you've experienced. Cold that'll kill you. Isolation that'll drive you crazy. Work from sunrise to sunset. I'm not offering comfort or easy living. I'm offering partnership. Someone to build a life with. Someone who won't quit when things get hard. Clara's hands were shaking again, but not from rage this time. Why me? She whispered. For the first time, something that might have been a smile touched the corner of Vance's mouth. Because everyone in this room is looking at you like you're worthless, and I think they're wrong. The trading post was completely silent now. Clara looked around the room, at Mackenzie, who'd worked her like a mule for 7 months, at the people who'd mocked her, tripped her, made her feel invisible, at Rebecca Sharp, whose pretty face was twisted with confusion and jealousy. Then she looked back at Elias Vance. I'll need to pack my things, she said. The room exploded. People shouting. Mackenzie sputtering about the contract terms. Rebecca demanding to know what was happening. Men laughing, women whispering, everyone talking at once. Vance ignored all of it. How long do you need? 10 minutes. I'll wait. Clara walked past him, through the crowd that parted like water, back to the storage room where she'd slept for 7 months. She owned almost nothing, one other dress, torn and waiting to be mended, a spare pair of stockings, a hairbrush with half the bristles missing, a small bundle of letters from her dead mother. She packed it all into a canvas bag in less than 5 minutes. When she emerged, the trading post was still chaos, but Vance was standing exactly where she'd left him, patient and unmoved by the noise around him. Ready? He asked. Clara nodded. Mackenzie stepped in front of them. Now hold on. We should talk about this. Clara, you don't know this man. He could be... Could be what? Vance said quietly. Worse than working for you. Mackenzie's mouth snapped shut. Vance looked at Clara. Last chance to change your mind. Clara thought about 7 months of mockery. 2 more years of the same. The rest of her life being invisible, unwanted, worthless in everyone's eyes. I'm not changing my mind. They walked to the door together. Behind them someone shouted, She'll be back in a week, you watch. Fat cow can't handle the mountains. Clara's hand tightened on her bag. Vance opened the door. Cold air rushed in, carrying snow and the smell of winter. Bet you $5 she's back in 3 days, someone else yelled. I'll take that bet. She won't last 2. Laughter followed them out into the storm. Outside, the wind hit like a wall. Clara gasped, the cold so intense it burned her lungs. Snow swirled in white sheets, obscuring everything more than 20 feet away. Vance had 2 horses tied near the trading post. Big, sturdy animals built for mountain travel. He checked the saddles and supplies while Clara stood in the snow, reality crashing down on her. What the hell had she just done? She'd agreed to marry a man she didn't know, ride into the deadliest mountains in Montana with someone who might be an outlaw, a killer, or worse. She had no idea where his cabin was, how far they'd travel, or what would happen when they got there. This was insane. This was. You having second thoughts? Vance asked. Clara looked back at the trading post. Through the frosted window, she could see people crowding around, watching, probably still laughing. No, she said. Good. You ever ridden before? A few times, not much. Vance moved to the second horse, a grey mare with kind eyes. This is Ruth. She's steady, won't spook easy. I'll show you how to mount. He helped her into the saddle, his hands firm but not rough. Clara settled onto the horse, feeling the animal shift beneath her weight. We've got about 4 hours of daylight left, Vance said, mounting his own horse, a huge black gelding. We'll ride until dark, make camp, then start again tomorrow. Going to take us 3 days to reach the cabin, weather permitting. You feel like you're going to fall off, you tell me immediately. Understood? Understood. Vance studied her for a moment, those grey eyes reading something in her face. Then he nodded once and turned his horse toward the mountains. They rode out of Black Hollow Pass as the storm intensified. Behind them, the settlement disappeared into white. The sounds of laughter faded. The trading post became a memory. Clara gripped the reins with bleeding hands and followed Elias Vance into the wilderness. Kiesk. The first hour was hell. The cold cut through Clara's thin coat like it wasn't there. Her fingers went numb, her face burned. The horse beneath her swayed and shifted over uneven ground, and every muscle Clara owned screamed in protest at the unfamiliar position. Vance rode ahead, his back straight, moving with the kind of ease that came from years in the saddle. He didn't look back. Clara gritted her teeth and kept riding. The landscape changed as they climbed. The flat scrub land around Black Hollow gave way to rolling hills, then steeper slopes covered in pine trees that creaked under the weight of snow. The wind never stopped. It howled through the trees, shook branches overhead, drove snow into Clara's face until she could barely see. Twice she almost fell off the horse. The first time Ruth stumbled on hidden ice and Clara lurched sideways, her hands scrabbling for the saddle horn. She caught herself breathing hard, her heart hammering. Vance glanced back. "You okay?" "Fine, Clara." Clara lied. They kept moving. The second time, her numb hands lost their grip on the reins. She felt herself sliding, the ground rushing up. A hand caught her arm. Vance had wheeled his horse around and grabbed her before she hit the ground. He steadied her back into the saddle, his grip iron strong. "Pay attention," he said, not angry, just matter of fact. "This country doesn't give second chances." Clara nodded, unable to speak. By the time they stopped for the night, Clara couldn't feel her feet. Her legs were shaking. Her back felt like someone had beaten it with a hammer. When Vance told her to dismount, she half fell off Ruth, landing in snow up to her knees. "Easy," Vance said. He was beside her suddenly, one hand on her elbow. "You did good today." Clara laughed. It came out harsh and bitter. "I almost fell off twice. But you didn't, and you kept moving. That's what matters." He helped her to a fallen tree, brushed snow off it, and made her sit. Then he worked with swift efficiency, unsaddling the horses, tying them where they could reach some scrub grass, pulling supplies from the packs. Within 20 minutes he had a fire going. The heat was almost painful against Clara's frozen skin. She held her hands toward it, watching ice melt off her gloves. Vance melted snow in a pot, made coffee, and handed her a cup that steamed in the freezing air. Clara wrapped both hands around it. The warmth spreading through her fingers felt like the best thing she'd ever experienced. "Drink it slow," Vance said. "Your stomach's probably too cold for anything else right now." He was right. The coffee burned going down, but it stayed down, spreading heat through her chest. They sat in silence for a while. The fire crackled. Wind moaned through the trees. Somewhere in the distance something howled. Clara flinched. "Wolves," Vance said. "They won't come near the fire." "You're sure?" "Reasonably sure." That was not reassuring. Vance pulled out hardtack and dried meat. They ate without talking. The food was tough and flavorless, but Clara was so hungry she didn't care. When she finished, exhaustion hit her like a physical force. Her eyes kept closing. "You need to sleep," Vance said. "I'll set up the bedrolls." Clara watched as he pulled thick furs and blankets from the packs, arranging them near the fire. 2 separate bedrolls, she noticed, far enough apart to be proper. "You take that one," Vance said, pointing to the bedroll closest to the fire. "I'll keep watch for a bit." Clara wanted to argue that she should take a turn at watch, that she could pull her weight, but she was so tired the words wouldn't come. She crawled into the bedroll, and the furs enveloped her like a warm cave. She was asleep in seconds. She woke sometime deep in the night, disoriented and freezing. The fire had burned down to coals. The darkness was absolute, no moon, no stars, just black pressing in from all sides. Clara's breath came out in white clouds. She pulled the furs tighter, shivering. Across the fire, Elias Vance sat with his rifle across his knees, eyes open, watching the darkness. "You don't sleep," Clara whispered. "Sleep light." His voice was quiet. "Old habit. From when you were an outlaw?" She regretted the question immediately. Too personal. Too direct. She barely knew this man. but Vance didn't seem offended. People tell you I was an outlaw. People tell a lot of stories about you. Most of them wrong. He added a branch to the fire. Flames licked up, pushing back the darkness a few feet. I wasn't an outlaw. I was a lawman. Long time ago. Clara sat up slowly. What happened? Got tired of watching the law fail people who needed it most. Quit. Came to the mountains. That's not the whole story. He looked at her across the fire, and something in his expression softened. No, it's not, but it's all I'm sharing tonight. Fair enough. Why did you buy my contract? Clara asked. The real reason. Vance was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his words came slow, like he was choosing each one carefully. 8 years ago, I had a wife, Emily. She was small, delicate, everything people think a woman should be. We were happy. She got pregnant. He stopped, swallowed. She died in childbirth. Baby died with her. I buried them both on a spring morning and realized I'd built my life around someone who couldn't survive the frontier. Not her fault, just reality. Clara's throat tightened. I've been alone since then, Vance continued. Figured I'd stay that way. But loneliness is its own kind of dying. Slower, quieter. So I started thinking about what I actually need. Not what I want, not what looks good, what I need. And what do you need? A partner. Someone tough enough to survive up here. Someone who won't break when things get hard, and things always get hard. Someone who understands that life isn't pretty or comfortable or easy, but it can still be worth living. He looked at her directly. I watched you in that trading post for 10 minutes. Watched you take abuse from people who wouldn't last a day in the mountains. Watched you work with bleeding hands without complaining. Watched you get tripped and humiliated and still get back up. That's tougher than most men I know. Clara's eyes burned. You don't know me. Not yet, but I know this. You survived something down there that would have broken someone softer. And if you can survive that, you can survive the mountains. What if you're wrong? Then we're both in trouble. He smiled slightly, but I don't think I'm wrong. The fire popped. Sparks drifted up into the darkness. I'm scared, Clara admitted. Good. Fear keeps you alert. It's overconfidence that gets people killed. She pulled the furs tighter. Those people back in Black Hollow, they're betting I'll fail. Those people are idiots. Despite everything, the cold, the fear, the absolute insanity of her situation, Clara laughed. Vance's smile widened. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be harder than today. How is that possible? We start climbing. Clara lay back down, but sleep was harder to find now. Her mind raced with questions, fears, possibilities. She'd left everything behind for a man she barely knew, based on nothing but a strange certainty that staying in Black Hollow would kill something essential in her. Was that brave or stupid? Maybe both. Eventually, exhaustion won. She drifted off to the sound of wind in the trees and the quiet presence of Elias Vance keeping watch through the darkness. The second day was worse than the first. They climbed steadily into the mountains, the terrain growing steeper and more treacherous. The horses struggled through snow that sometimes reached their chests. Clara's entire body ached. Muscles she didn't know existed screamed in protest, and it was colder, so much colder. By midday, Clara's face was so numb she couldn't tell if she was still breathing through her nose. Her hands were useless blocks of ice despite the gloves. Her feet might as well have been carved from stone. Vance called a brief halt near a frozen stream. He helped Clara down from Ruth, and her legs buckled the moment they touched the ground. Easy. Vance caught her. You're doing good. I can't feel anything below my knees. That's the cold. Sit. I'll get a fire going. While Vance built the fire, Clara sat on a rock and tried to make her fingers work enough to hold a cup. It took 3 tries. Drink this. Vance handed her something that looked like coffee but smelled like medicine. What is it? Pine needle tea. Tastes like shit. Keeps you from getting sick. He was right. It tasted terrible. Clara drank it anyway. They rested for 30 minutes, then pushed on. The afternoon was a blur of white and pain. Clara stopped thinking, just moved, gripped the saddle, followed Vance's back through the endless snow. By the time they made camp that night, she was too exhausted to help. Vance did everything: horses, fire, food. He brought her coffee and hardtack, made sure she ate, then guided her to the bedroll. 2 days down, he said, 1 to go. Clara didn't have the energy to respond. The 3rd day started before dawn. Vance shook her awake while stars still filled the sky. Storm's coming. Need to reach the cabin before it hits. They rode through the pre-dawn darkness, the landscape slowly revealing itself in shades of grey. The mountains had become massive here. Peaks that disappeared into low clouds, cliffs that dropped away into nothing, valleys filled with shadow. Clara had never felt so small. The terrain grew brutal. They picked their way along ridges where one wrong step would send horse and rider tumbling hundreds of feet. They crossed frozen streams where the ice groaned under the horses' weight. They climbed slopes so steep Clara had to lean forward and grip Ruth's mane to keep from sliding backward. And through it all, Vance moved with absolute confidence, choosing paths Clara couldn't see, reading the landscape like a language she didn't speak. Around midday, the storm hit. Wind howled down from the peaks with a force that nearly knocked Clara from the saddle. Snow came sideways, so thick she couldn't see Vance, even though he rode less than 10 feet ahead. "Stay close," he shouted over the wind. "Don't lose sight of me." Clara urged Ruth forward, her heart hammering. The horse fought through drifts that reached her chest. Wind screamed. The world became nothing but white and cold, and the dark shape of Vance ahead. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Clara lost all sense of time. Then suddenly Vance was beside her, leaning close to be heard over the storm. "We're almost there. 5 more minutes." Clara nodded, too cold to speak. They descended into a valley she hadn't known was there. Steep sides that blocked the worst of the wind. Trees grew thick here, offering some protection. And at the far end of the valley, built against the mountainside itself, stood a cabin. Not a shack, a real cabin. Solid logs, stone chimney, sturdy roof, windows covered with shutters, outbuildings nearby, a smokehouse, a stable, what might have been a storage shed. Vance had built himself a fortress. He dismounted near the stable and helped Clara down. She collapsed against him, her legs refusing to hold her weight. "I got you," he said. "Come on, just a little further." He half carried her to the cabin door, got it open, and brought her inside. Warmth. The cabin was cold, but not frozen. Vance had banked a fire before he left, and coals still glowed in the fireplace. He settled Clara in a chair, then moved with practiced efficiency, building up the fire, lighting lamps, bringing her furs. Within minutes, heat began spreading through the room. Clara looked around. The cabin was one large room, with a sleeping loft above, a kitchen area with a stove and counter, a heavy table with chairs, shelves packed with supplies, furs on the floor, tools hanging on walls, everything clean, organized, purposeful. "It's not much," Vance said. "It's amazing," Clara whispered. He looked at her, surprised. "You think so? You built this, all of it? Over 5 years still working on it." Clara stared at the solid walls, the tight roof, the stone fireplace that could have come from a house in town. "How did you—" "1 log at a time," he smiled slightly. "Same as everything else." He made her drink more pine needle tea, then fed her stew he'd kept frozen outside. Real stew with meat and vegetables, the best thing Clara had tasted in months. While she ate, Vance went back out into the storm to care for the horses. Clara wanted to help, but her body was finished. She sat by the fire, wrapped in furs, feeling warmth slowly return to her frozen limbs. When Vance came back inside, covered in snow, he barred the door and shook out his coat. "Storm's going to last a few days," he said. "We're stuck inside till it passes." Clara nodded. They sat in silence for a while, listening to wind hammer the cabin walls. The fire crackled. Outside, the storm raged. But inside, surrounded by thick walls and warm firelight, Clara felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Safety. "Thank you," she said quietly. Vance looked up from the rifle he was cleaning. "For what?" "For getting me out of there. For not treating me like I'm worthless. For—" She gestured at the cabin. "This." He set down the rifle. "You earned this. You made it here. That's more than most people could do." "I almost didn't." "But you did." He stood, moved to a shelf, and pulled down a bottle and 2 tin cups. "We should talk about what happens next." Clara's stomach tightened. "Okay." Vance poured amber liquid into both cups and handed one to Clara. "Whiskey." She sipped it carefully. It burned, but warmer than the pine tea. "I told you I need a wife," Vance said. "That's still true, but I'm not going to force anything. You want to stay here as hired help, work for food and shelter, that's fine. You want to leave when the weather clears, I'll give you supplies and directions to the nearest settlement. No hard feelings." "What do you want?" "I want a partner, someone I can build a life with, someone who'll stand beside me when things get hard." He paused. "But that's got to be a choice you make freely, not because you're trapped or scared or don't have options." Clara studied him across the firelight. Elias Vance, former lawman, mountain recluse, a man everyone feared but nobody really knew. "What would being your wife mean?" she asked. "Specifically?" "Work, a lot of it. We'd divide everything. Hunting, trapping, maintaining the cabin, preserving food, caring for livestock. Winter's the hardest. We get snowed in for months at a time. It's just us. No neighbors, no society, no help if things go wrong." "What about—" Clara hesitated. "The marriage part, the intimate part." Vance's expression didn't change. "We'd build toward that. I'm not expecting anything immediate. We're strangers. We need time to know each other, trust each other. But eventually, yes, I'd want a real marriage, partnership in every sense." Clara's face burned, but she held his gaze. I don't have experience with—" "Neither did Emily when we married." His voice was gentle. "It's something you learn together." The wind shook the shutters. Snow hissed against the windows. "Can I think about it?" Clara asked. "Take all the time you need." She nodded, relief washing through her. They finished their whiskey in comfortable silence. Then Vance showed her the loft where she'd sleep, a small space with a real bed, furs piled thick, a window looking out toward the mountains. "I'll sleep down here tonight," he said. "Give you privacy." Clara climbed the ladder to the loft, her body screaming with exhaustion. The bed was the softest thing she'd felt in months. She burrowed into the furs and closed her eyes. Below, she heard Vance moving around the cabin, banking the fire, checking the door, settling in for the night. She thought about Black Hollow Pass, about Mackenzie's trading post, about the people who'd bet she'd fail. Then she thought about 3 days of hell and the man who'd guided her through it without cruelty, without mockery, without making her feel like a burden. She thought about a cabin built one log at a time. She thought about partnership. And Clara Whitmore realized something. She'd already made her choice. She'd made it the moment she said yes in the trading post. Everything since then had just been confirmation. The storm lasted 4 days. 4 days of wind that screamed like something dying, snow that piled against the cabin walls until the windows disappeared beneath white drifts, cold so intense that ice formed on the inside of the shutters, despite the fire burning constantly in the hearth. Clara woke on the first morning to find Vance already up, dressed, and preparing to go outside. "Where are you going?" she asked, climbing down from the loft. Her muscles ached worse than yesterday, if that was possible. "Livestock needs tending. Storm or no storm, animals need food and water." "I'll help." Vance paused, studying her. "You sure? It's brutal out there." "I'm sure." He handed her a coat from a peg by the door. Heavy fur, sized for a man. It swallowed Clara, but the warmth was immediate. Then came fur-lined gloves, a wool scarf, and a hat that covered everything but her eyes. "Stay close to me," Vance said. Visibility's maybe 5 feet. You get turned around in this, you're dead before you find your way back. They stepped outside together, and the storm hit Clara like a physical blow. Wind tore at her clothes. Snow stung her face. The cold was so intense it hurt to breathe. Vance grabbed her hand and pulled her forward. The stable was maybe 30 yards from the cabin. It took them 5 minutes to reach it, fighting through drifts that came up to Clara's thighs. By the time Vance got the door open and hauled her inside, she was gasping. Christ, she managed. Yeah, Vance brushed snow off both of them. Welcome to winter in the high country. Inside the stable, 4 animals waited. The 2 horses, a milk cow and a goat. They stamped and shifted nervously, their breath steaming in the cold air. Vance showed Clara what needed doing. Fresh hay, water hauled from the stream, which meant breaking through ice with an axe, mucking out soiled bedding, checking the animals for injury or illness. It was hard, miserable work made worse by the cold. But Clara threw herself into it, determined to prove she could handle whatever the mountains demanded. When they finally made it back to the cabin 2 hours later, Clara was so cold she couldn't feel her face. Vance sat her by the fire and made her drink hot coffee until sensation returned to her extremities in painful tingles. You did good, he said. Clara's teeth were still chattering. That's what passes for good up here. You didn't quit. You didn't complain. Yeah, that's good. The second day followed the same pattern. Outside into the storm to tend animals. Back to the cabin to thaw out. The routine had a rhythm to it, brutal but manageable. On the third day, Clara woke to find Vance already dressed and holding a rifle. What's wrong? She asked. Heard something last night. Probably nothing, but I'm going to check the perimeter. I'm coming with you. Clara, I'm coming. He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. Grabbed the shotgun from over the door. You know how to use it? Not really. Vance showed her quickly how to hold it, how to aim, how to fire if she needed to. Point at what you want to hit, pull the trigger, and hold on tight, because the kick will knock you on your ass if you're not ready. They went out together into the storm. Vance led them in a wide circle around the cabin and outbuildings, studying tracks that Clara couldn't even see in the blowing snow. There, he pointed to marks in the snow near the smokehouse. Mountain lion, big one. Clara's grip tightened on the shotgun. Is it still here? No. Tracks are a few hours old. Probably smelled the meat in the smokehouse and came to investigate. But it means we need to be careful. Lion that size gets hungry enough, it'll try for the livestock. They finished the circuit and returned to the cabin. Vance spent the afternoon checking his weapons, cleaning them, preparing. You ever kill a mountain lion? Clara asked. 3 of them. Is it hard? It's necessary. He looked up from the rifle. That's different from hard. Out here, you do what needs doing. You don't think about whether it's hard or easy, you just do it. That night, Clara lay in the loft listening to the storm and thinking about necessity, about doing what needed doing, about survival, being less about comfort and more about making the right choice in the moment, over and over until the choices became habit. By the 4th day, the storm began to ease. The wind dropped from a scream to a howl to a constant moan. Snow still fell, but thinner now, almost gentle compared to the previous days. Vance went out to check the damage. He came back an hour later covered in snow, but looking satisfied. We're good. Roof held. Animals are fine. Lost some shingles on the smokehouse, but I can fix that. Clara was cooking, attempting to cook. Breakfast on the stove. Eggs from the chickens Vance kept in a separate coop. Bread he'd baked before leaving for Black Hollow. The eggs were slightly burned. She'd never been good at cooking. Smells good, Vance lied. Clara shot him a look. It smells burned. Little bit, he smiled, but I've eaten worse. They sat at the table and ate the mediocre breakfast together. Outside, the storm continued its slow death. I've been thinking, Clara said. Vance looked up. About? Your offer, marriage. His face went carefully neutral, and Clara set down her fork. Her hands were shaking slightly, but not from cold this time. I want to say yes, but I need to know something first. What? What happens if it doesn't work? If we try this and it turns out we can't stand each other, or I'm not strong enough for this life, or you realize you made a mistake? She met his eyes. I need to know I'm not trapped again. Vance was quiet for a moment. Then he stood, went to a shelf and pulled down a wooden box. He brought it back to the table and opened it. Inside were papers, documents, and a leather pouch. He pushed the pouch across the table to Clara. Open it. She did. Gold coins, at least $50 worth. That's yours, Vance said. Emergency money. If things don't work out, if you want to leave, that'll get you to the nearest settlement and set you up for a few months while you figure out what's next. Clara stared at the gold. You're giving this to me. I'm giving you a choice. Real choice. Not the kind where you're forced into something because you have no other options. He pulled out one of the papers. This is a letter I wrote. It says you worked for me as hired help, paid in full, no debt owed. If you need to leave and need references, you've got them. Clara's throat tightened. Why would you do this? Because I'm not interested in keeping someone who doesn't want to be here, and because you deserve to know you're choosing this freely. She looked at the gold, at the letter, at this man who'd bought her contract from Mackenzie, and then immediately offered her a way out. I choose this, she said quietly. I choose you. I choose partnership. Vance's expression shifted, relief maybe, or something deeper. You're sure? I'm terrified, but yeah, I'm sure. He reached across the table and took her hand. His palm was rough, calloused from years of hard work. Then we'll make this work, together. Clara squeezed his hand. When do we, how does this? We'll wait for a circuit judge. They come through once or twice a year. Could be spring before we see one. Until then, we'll just be together, learn each other, build trust, and share the work, every bit of it. The storm ended that night. By morning, the world outside was buried under 3 feet of fresh snow, glittering in sunlight so bright it hurt to look at. The sky was blue and clear, the air so cold it felt sharp in Clara's lungs. Vance took her outside to survey the damage and teach her about the daily work of mountain survival. The education was brutal and immediate. First came water. The stream was frozen solid, which meant chopping through ice with an axe until they hit flowing water beneath. Clara's first swing nearly took off her own foot. Vance caught the axe mid-swing and repositioned her hands. Like this. Let the weight of the axe do the work. Don't fight it. She tried again. The ice cracked. Third swing, it broke through. Good, Vance said. Now fill the buckets. Hauling water back to the cabin left Clara's arms trembling. The buckets were heavy, the path treacherous with ice, and by the time they made the third trip, she was sweating despite the cold. How often do we need to do this? She gasped. Twice a day, more when we're doing laundry or butchering. Christ! Next came the animals. Feeding, watering, mucking stalls. The work was endless and repetitive, but Vance moved through it with practiced efficiency, showing Clara the rhythm of it. Consistency matters up here, he explained. Animals need routine, same feeding times every day. They learn to trust it. Break the routine, they get stressed, and stressed animals get sick. After animals came firewood. The cabin burned through wood at an astonishing rate, and the stacks needed constant replenishment. Vance handed Clara an axe. You ever split wood? No. Time to learn. He showed her how to read the grain, where to strike, how to use the weight of the axe and the force of the swing together. Clara's first attempts were disasters. The axe bounced off the wood, stuck halfway through, or missed entirely. Vance didn't laugh. He just adjusted her stance, her grip, her aim, and made her try again. By the 20th log, she managed to split one clean through. There, Vance said, you've got it. Clara's arms felt like rubber. How many do we need? 2 cords before the next storm. She stared at the massive pile of unsplit logs. That's hundreds of pieces. Yep. When's the next storm? Vance squinted at the sky. 3 days, maybe 4. They worked until Clara physically couldn't lift the axe anymore. Then Vance took over, his movements smooth and powerful, splitting wood like it was nothing. Clara watched him work, impressed despite her exhaustion. He moved like someone who'd done this 10,000 times, every motion economical, no wasted effort. "How long have you been up here?" she asked. 8 years. Alone, the whole time. Except for supply runs. Yeah. That's a long time to be by yourself. Vance paused, axe raised. Too long. He brought it down, splitting another log. That's why you're here. That night, Clara could barely climb the ladder to the loft. Every muscle screamed. Her hands were blistered despite the gloves. Her back felt like someone had beaten it with a club. She collapsed onto the bed and groaned. "You'll feel worse tomorrow," Vance called up from below. "How is that possible?" "You're using muscles that have never been used. They're angry about it." He was right. The next morning, Clara woke feeling like she'd been trampled by a horse. Getting out of bed took 5 minutes. Climbing down from the loft was an exercise in controlled falling. Vance took one look at her face and laughed. Actually laughed. "It's not funny," Clara said. "Little bit funny." He handed her coffee. "Drink this. We've got work." The second day was worse than the first, and the third day was worse than the second. By the end of the week, Clara was fairly certain she was dying. But something strange happened. Her body began to adapt. The blisters hardened into calluses. Her muscles stopped screaming and started just aching. She learned to split wood without missing, to haul water without spilling, to read the animals' moods and needs. And slowly, day by day, Clara began to understand the rhythm of mountain life. It wasn't comfortable. It wasn't easy. But there was a satisfaction to it, finishing a hard day's work and seeing tangible results. A full woodpile, fed animals, a warm cabin, survival earned through effort. Vance was a patient teacher. He never mocked her mistakes, never made her feel stupid for not knowing things. He just showed her, corrected her when necessary, and let her learn by doing. "You're getting stronger," he observed one afternoon while they worked on repairing the smokehouse roof. Clara looked down at her arms. They did look different, more defined, harder. "I feel stronger." "You are. Most people who come up here, they break within the first month. You're past that now." "So I've graduated?" Vance smiled. "Hell no. Winter hasn't even really started yet. This is still the easy part. This is easy compared to January, yeah." Clara threw a nail at him. He caught it grinning. The day settled into routine. Morning chores, breakfast, work projects, repairing buildings, preserving food, maintaining equipment, lunch, more work, evening chores, dinner, a few hours by the fire before sleep. And during those evening hours, Clara and Vance began to actually talk, not just about work or survival, but about their lives, their pasts, the people they'd been before the mountains. Clara told him about growing up poor in Ohio, about her mother dying when she was 16, her father disappearing a year later, leaving debts Clara tried to pay by working in a factory, about being cheated by the wagon boss who sold her west with promises of honest work and a fresh start. Vance listened without judgment, his face serious in the firelight. In turn, he told her about being a lawman in Kansas, about watching criminals walk free because they had money or connections while honest people suffered, about the day he arrested a man for murder, only to see him released 3 days later because the victim was just a prostitute and nobody cared. That was the end for me, Vance said. I realized the law I was enforcing wasn't actually about justice. It was about protecting people who already had power. So I quit. And came here after Emily died, yeah. Figured if civilization was broken, I'd leave it behind. Do you regret it? He looked at her across the fire. Not anymore. Another night, Clara asked about his first wife. The question had been hovering between them for days. Vance was quiet for a long time. Then he started talking. Emily was 19 when we married. I was 26. She was everything people told me a wife should be. Beautiful, gentle, good at all the domestic things. We were happy." He paused. "But she wasn't built for frontier life. The isolation scared her. The work was too hard. She tried. She really tried, but her body just couldn't handle it." How far along was she? Far along was 8 months. She went into labor early. We were in Kansas then, had a doctor in town, but something went wrong. Baby wouldn't come. Emily was bleeding. Doctor did everything he could. Vance's voice went rough. Took her 12 hours to die. Baby never even drew breath. Clara's eyes burned. "I'm so sorry." I buried them on our property and left Kansas that same week. Came to Montana, went as high into the mountains as I could go, and tried to forget everything. He looked at Clara. "Didn't work. You can't outrun grief. It follows you everywhere." "Is that why you were alone so long?" "Partly. Also figured I couldn't survive losing someone like that again. So I just didn't let anyone close." "What changed?" Vance smiled slightly. "Got tired of talking to myself. Started thinking maybe loneliness was worse than risk." They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling between them. "I'm not delicate like Emily," Clara said finally. "I know. I'm not beautiful either." "You're wrong about that." Clara looked up, startled. "What?" "You're wrong." Vance met her eyes. "You're strong. That's beautiful. You're capable. That's beautiful. You don't give up. That's beautiful. The woman in that trading post, all painted and primped, they wouldn't last a week up here. You've lasted longer than most men I know." Clara's throat was tight. "Nobody's ever said anything like that to me before." Then nobody was paying attention. She looked away, overwhelmed by something she couldn't quite name. The next day brought the first real test of Clara's new life. She woke to Vance shaking her shoulder, his face grim. "Get up, we've got a problem." Clara scrambled down from the loft. "What's wrong?" "Mountain lion. It killed 3 chickens during the night." They went outside together. The chicken coop was a disaster, feathers everywhere, blood in the snow, 3 dead birds. "Damn it," Vance muttered. "I should have reinforced this last week." "What do we do?" "Hunt it. That cat knows where the food is now. It'll keep coming back until we stop it." They spent the day tracking. Vance showed Clara how to read the prints in the snow, how to follow the trail, how to move quietly through the forest. The lion had circled the cabin 3 times before heading into the high rocks. "Smart," Vance said. "It's watching us, learning our patterns." "How do we kill it?" "We don't, not yet. First we make the cabin secure so it can't get to the livestock. Then we set up a watch. Then, if it comes back, we kill it." They worked through the afternoon, reinforcing the chicken coop with heavier wire, adding a second layer of protection to the stable, setting up clear sight lines from the cabin windows. By evening, Clara was exhausted but wired with nervous energy. "Will it come back tonight?" she asked. "Maybe, probably not, but we'll be ready either way." Vance set up a watch rotation, 2 hours on, 2 hours off, through the night. He took the first shift while Clara tried to sleep. She couldn't. She lay in the loft, listening to every sound, jumping at every creak of the cabin. When Vance woke her for her shift, he handed her the shotgun. "If you see anything, fire once to warn it off. If it doesn't leave, fire again to kill. Don't hesitate, don't try to be humane. Just pull the trigger." Clara took up position by the window, shotgun across her knees, staring out at the moonlit snow. The forest was absolutely silent, not even wind, just stillness so complete it felt unnatural. An hour passed, then another. Clara's eyes burned from not blinking. Her hands ached from gripping the shotgun too tight. Then she saw it, a shadow moving at the edge of the clearing, low to the ground, massive, the mountain lion. It moved toward the chicken coop with liquid grace, absolutely silent. Clara's heart hammered. She remembered Vance's instructions. Warning shot first. She aimed high and fired. The boom was deafening. The lion leaped sideways, startled, and disappeared into the trees. Vance was beside her in seconds, rifle raised. "Where?" "There, near the coop. I fired high, like you said." "Good." He watched the tree line. "Good. They waited together, but the lion didn't return. "It's gone," Vance said after 10 minutes, "at least for tonight." Clara's hands were shaking now that the danger had passed. "Did I do okay?" "You did perfect." He took the shotgun from her. "Go sleep. I'll finish the watch." "I can stay." "Clara, you faced down a mountain lion. You've earned some rest." She climbed back to the loft, adrenaline still singing through her blood. The lion returned twice more over the next week. Each time, Clara or Vance drove it off with warning shots, and each time it retreated a little slower, a little more reluctant. "It's getting desperate," Vance said after the third encounter. "That's when they're most dangerous." On the 8th night, Clara was sleeping when a sound woke her. Not a gunshot, something else. A scream. Animal, not human, high-pitched and terrified. She scrambled down from the loft to find Vance already at the door, rifle in hand. "The goat," he said, "stay here." "Like hell?" They went out together into the darkness. The stable door was damaged, claw marks gouged deep into the wood. Inside, the animals were panicking, horses kicking, cow lowing, and the goat screaming that awful sound. The mountain lion was inside. It had the goat by the throat, blood everywhere, its yellow eyes reflecting their lamplight. Vance didn't hesitate. He aimed and fired in one smooth motion. The lion dropped, dead before it hit the ground. The goat collapsed a second later, throat torn open, dying. Vance knelt beside it and ended its suffering with his knife. Then he stood, covered in blood, and looked at Clara. "You all right?" She nodded, unable to speak. They cleaned up in silence, dragged the lion's body outside, buried the goat, calmed the other animals, repaired the stable door. By the time they finished, dawn was breaking. Back in the cabin, Vance washed the blood from his hands and arms while Clara made coffee. "I'm sorry about the goat," she said. "Nature of life up here. Sometimes you lose animals. Sometimes you lose more than that." He dried his hands. "But we protected what we could and we stopped the threat. That's all you can do." Clara handed him coffee. Their fingers brushed and something passed between them, a shared understanding of what they'd just survived together. "Thank you for not making me stay inside," Clara said. "You're my partner. Partners face danger together." The words settled between them like a promise. The weeks turned colder. Snow fell almost daily now, accumulating in drifts that reached the cabin windows. The temperature dropped so low that water froze in the bucket between the stream and the cabin. Frost formed inside the shutters every night despite the roaring fire. And through it all, Clara and Vance worked side by side. They fell into an easy partnership. She learned his rhythms and he learned hers. They didn't need to talk much anymore. A glance was enough to communicate what needed doing. One morning in early December, Clara woke to find Vance already gone. A note on the table said he'd gone to check his trap lines and would be back by afternoon. Clara spent the day alone, maintaining the cabin, tending animals, splitting wood. It was the first time she'd been completely alone in the mountains, and she expected to be frightened. Instead, she felt capable. She knew what needed doing, and she could do it. When Vance returned at sunset, carrying 3 beaver pelts and a rabbit, he found Clara had made stew, actual good stew, not burned, and baked bread that was only slightly lopsided. He stopped in the doorway and smiled. "Smells amazing." "Don't sound so surprised." "I'm not surprised, I'm impressed." They ate dinner together, and Vance told her about his day on the trap lines. Then Clara told him about fixing the fence on the chicken coop and discovering that one of the hens was broody. It was domestic, normal, the kind of evening married people probably shared every day, and Clara realized with a jolt that she was happy, not comfortable, not safe from hardship, but happy. That night, after Vance had gone to sleep downstairs and Clara lay in the loft, she thought about the woman she'd been in Black Hollow Pass, invisible, mocked, worthless in everyone's eyes. That woman was gone. In her place was someone stronger, someone capable, someone who could survive mountain lions and brutal cold and back-breaking work, someone who mattered. Clara fell asleep smiling. The circuit judge arrived on a frozen morning in late December when the sky was the color of old iron and the temperature had dropped so low that spit froze before it hit the ground. Clara was hauling water when she heard the sound of horses and voices coming up the valley. She dropped the buckets and ran back to the cabin, heart pounding. "Elias, someone's coming." Vance emerged from the stable, rifle already in hand, his face cautious. Visitors in winter were rare, and rare meant either very good or very bad. 3 riders appeared through the trees, 2 men and a woman, all bundled in heavy furs, leading a pack mule loaded with supplies. The lead rider raised a hand in greeting. "Elias Vance, that you?" Vance lowered the rifle slightly. "Thomas Garrett, what brings you up here in the dead of winter?" "Circuit business." The man, Garrett, was older, maybe 60, with a weathered face and kind eyes. "Judge Morrison's making rounds. We heard you might be needing his services." Vance glanced at Clara, something unreadable in his expression. Then he looked back at Garrett. "News travels fast." News of Elias Vance buying a woman's contract and disappearing into the mountains? Hell yes, it travels fast. Garrett dismounted, groaning as his feet hit the ground. "We've been riding for 3 days. Any chance you've got coffee?" 20 minutes later, they were all crowded inside the cabin. Judge Morrison turned out to be the woman, a sharp-eyed, no-nonsense type in her 50s who'd been riding circuit in Montana Territory for 15 years. The third rider was her clerk, a nervous young man named Peter, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "So," Morrison said, warming her hands around a cup of coffee, "you two looking to get married legal?" Clara and Vance exchanged a glance. "Yes," Vance said. Morrison studied them both with eyes that had probably seen every kind of human situation imaginable. "You sure about this, both of you?" "We're sure," Clara said. "You know each other long?" "Few months." "That's not very long." "Long enough," Vance said quietly. Morrison looked at Clara. "You doing this of your own free will? Nobody's forcing you, threatening you, holding anything over your head." "Nobody's forcing me." "You know you can say no, right here, right now, and we'll take you down to the settlement if that's what you want." Clara met the judge's eyes. "I don't want to go to the settlement. I want to stay here, with him." Morrison held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded. "All right then, let's make it official." The ceremony was quick and practical. Morrison read from a book of common law, asked if they both consented, had them repeat simple vows. Thomas Garrett and Peter served as witnesses, their signatures scratched onto the marriage certificate with cold, stiffened fingers. "By the authority vested in me by Montana Territory," Morrison said, "I pronounce you husband and wife." She looked at Vance. "You can kiss her if you want." Vance turned to Clara, and for a moment they just stood there, 2 people who'd made a commitment in front of witnesses, but still felt like strangers in some fundamental way. Then Vance leaned down and kissed her, brief, chaste, his lips cold against hers. Clara's first kiss. At 24 years old, standing in a mountain cabin, married to a man she'd known for 3 months. When they pulled apart, Morrison was smiling. "Congratulations. Try not to kill each other before spring." The visitors stayed for 2 days, resting their horses and waiting for the weather to clear. Clara found herself talking to Morrison during the long evenings, drawn to the older woman's direct manner and sharp intelligence. "You know what you've gotten yourself into?" Morrison asked on the second night, while the men were outside checking the animals. "I think so. Winter up here is brutal. Most couples who try mountain living end up hating each other by February. Isolation does things to people." Clara stirred the stew she was making. "We've been managing okay so far." "So far is different from 5 more months of winter." Morrison paused. "But you seem tougher than most. How'd you end up in Montana?" Clara told her the story. Ohio, the dishonest wagon boss, Mackenzie's trading post, the mockery and debt. Morrison listened without interrupting, her expression growing harder. "Terence Quill, that the name of the bastard who sold you?" "Yes." He's wanted in 3 territories for fraud and extortion. If I ever catch up with him, he's going to jail for a long time." Morrison looked at Clara. "You were lucky Vance found you when he did." "I know. He's a good man. Damaged, but good. Lost his first wife in childbirth. You know about that?" "He told me." Morrison nodded approvingly. "That's good. Means he's being honest with you. Some men would hide that kind of grief, pretend it didn't happen. Elias faced it head on, even if it took him years to work through." "Do you think he's worked through it?" "I think he's trying, and I think you're helping him whether you know it or not." When Morrison and her companions left on the 3rd morning, she pulled Clara aside. "You ever need help, you send word. Doesn't matter what it is. You understand?" "I understand. And don't let him get too isolated up here. Men like Elias, they can disappear inside themselves if they're not careful. Make him talk. Make him engage. Don't let him turn into a hermit who happens to have a wife." Clara watched the 3 riders disappear down the valley, then turned to find Vance standing beside her. "What did Morrison say to you?" he asked. "That I should make you talk." Vance smiled slightly. "I talk. Sometimes, when it suits you. What do you want to know?" Clara looked at him, her husband now, legally and officially. Everything. That night something shifted between them. Maybe it was the formality of the marriage. Maybe it was knowing they'd committed in front of witnesses. Or maybe it was just time finally catching up to intention. They sat by the fire after dinner, and Vance reached over and took Clara's hand. "Come here," he said quietly. Clara moved closer, her heart suddenly beating faster. Vance pulled her against him, his arm around her shoulders. She fit against his side, her head resting on his chest. She could hear his heartbeat, steady and strong. "This okay?" he asked. "Yeah." They sat like that for a long time, not talking, just being close. It was the most intimate they'd been, and Clara felt something unknotting inside her chest. Some fear she'd been carrying about, whether this was real, whether she mattered to him, whether she'd made a terrible mistake. "Clara," Vance said into the silence. "Yeah, I'm glad you're here." "Me too." His arm tightened around her. "I mean it. I know this life is hard. I know you didn't choose it because it was comfortable or easy, but having you here, it matters." Clara closed her eyes. "I was invisible for so long. Everyone looked through me like I was furniture. You're the first person who actually saw me." "I see you." "I know." Later, when they went to bed, still separately, Vance downstairs and Clara in the loft, Clara lay awake thinking about the weight of his arm around her shoulders, the sound of his heartbeat, the way his voice had gone soft when he said having her there mattered. She was falling in love with him. Maybe she'd been falling since the moment he looked at her across that crowded trading post and saw something worth saving. January hit the mountains like a fist wrapped in ice and darkness. The temperature dropped to levels Clara hadn't known were possible. 30 below zero. 40 below. So cold that metal burned skin on contact, that breath froze in the air, that stepping outside without proper covering meant frostbite in minutes. The sun barely rose above the peaks, giving them maybe 5 hours of grey daylight before darkness swallowed everything again. They were snowed in completely now. Drifts reached the cabin roof. The trail down to the valley disappeared under 20 feet of white. They were trapped until spring, isolated, alone. And Vance was right. It did things to people. The first fight happened on a morning so cold that ice had formed inside the cabin, despite the fire burning all night. Clara woke to find Vance already up, dressed, and preparing to go outside. "Where are you going?" she asked. "Trap lines. Haven't checked them in 4 days. It's 40 below zero. Traps still need checking." Clara climbed down from the loft, anger flaring hot in her chest. "You'll freeze to death out there. I've been doing this for 8 years. I know what I'm doing." "You're being stupid." Vance's expression hardened. "I'm being practical. Those traps are our income. No furs, no money for supplies come spring. What good is money if you're dead? I'm not going to die from checking trap lines." "You don't know that." I know the mountains better than anyone alive. I know my limits. I know what I can handle. Clara stepped in front of the door. I'm not letting you go out there. Vance's eyes went cold. You're not letting me? That's right. Clara, move. No. For a moment they stood there, locked in a battle of wills. Then Vance's jaw tightened and he reached past her for the door handle. Clara grabbed his arm. Please, just wait. Wait until it's warmer. It's not going to get warmer for 3 months. Then wait for tomorrow, for me, please. Something in her voice must have gotten through because Vance stopped. He looked at her and the hardness in his expression cracked slightly. You're really worried, he said. Of course I'm worried. You're my husband. I don't want you dying for a few beaver pelts. Vance exhaled slowly. Then, to Clara's surprise, he stepped back from the door. Fine, I'll wait until tomorrow. Thank you. But tomorrow I'm going and you're not stopping me. Fine. They glared at each other for a moment longer, then both looked away. The rest of the day was tense. They moved around the cabin, doing chores, not talking, the argument hanging between them like smoke. By evening, Clara couldn't take it anymore. I'm sorry, she said abruptly. Vance looked up from the knife he was sharpening. For what? For treating you like you don't know what you're doing. Morrison was right. You've been surviving up here for 8 years. You know the mountains. Vance set down the knife. You were right too. I was being stubborn. It was dangerous to go out in that cold. I'm not used to having someone worry about me. Well, get used to it because I'm going to worry. He smiled slightly. Yeah, I'm starting to realize that. Clara moved to sit beside him. We're going to fight sometimes, aren't we? Probably. We're two stubborn people stuck in a cabin for months. Be stranger if we didn't fight. As long as we can work through it. Vance took her hand. We will. Promise. The second fight was worse. It happened 3 weeks later during a blizzard that lasted for days. They were trapped inside the cabin, unable to even go to the stable. The animals huddled together while the storm raged. Cabin fever set in hard. Clara was trying to cook dinner when she knocked over a jar of preserved vegetables. It shattered on the floor, glass and food everywhere. Damn it! She grabbed a rag and started cleaning. Careful, Vance said. There's glass. I know there's glass. I can see it. Just saying you should be careful. I am being careful. You're being reckless. You're going to cut yourself. Clara threw down the rag. I'm being reckless. I'm trying to clean up a mess I made. I'm trying to help. I don't need help. I need you to stop hovering over me like I'm incompetent. Vance's face went hard. I wasn't hovering. I was trying to keep you from getting hurt. I'm not a child, Elias. I can clean up broken glass without supervision. Fine, do it yourself. He turned and walked to the far side of the cabin, putting as much distance between them as the small space allowed. Clara finished cleaning in angry silence, her hands shaking. When she was done, she threw the broken glass into the fire too hard and sparks flew up. Jesus, Clara, don't. They didn't speak for the rest of the evening. By bedtime, the silence was suffocating. Clara climbed to the loft without saying good night, her chest tight with misery. She'd been up there maybe 10 minutes when she heard Vance climbing the ladder. He appeared at the edge of the loft, his expression uncertain. Can I come up? Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. Vance climbed into the small space and sat on the edge of the bed. I'm sorry. Me too. I wasn't trying to make you feel incompetent. You're one of the most competent people I know. I overreacted. You're going stir-crazy. We both are. This storm's been going on for 4 days and we haven't been able to leave the cabin. It's making us both irritable. Clara felt tears burning behind her eyes. I hate fighting with you. I hate it too. Vance reached out and pulled her into his arms. But Morrison was right. Isolation does things to people. We're going to fight sometimes. It doesn't mean we're failing. It just means we're human. Clara buried her face against his chest. What if we can't make it through winter? We will. How do you know? Because we're both too stubborn to quit. Despite everything, Clara laughed. Vance was right. They were both too stubborn. He held her for a long time, and slowly the tension drained away. "Stay up here tonight," Clara said quietly. Vance pulled back to look at her. "You sure?" "I'm sure. I don't want to sleep alone." "Okay." He lay down beside her, still fully dressed, on top of the blankets. Clara curled against him, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her. It wasn't sexual, it was just closeness, two people weathering isolation together. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other against the cold and the darkness and the endless storm outside. February brought a brief warming spell, and with it, unexpected visitors. Clara and Vance were outside repairing storm damage when they heard horses approaching. 3 riders emerged from the trees, a man, a woman, and a young girl, maybe 12 years old. The man raised a hand in greeting. "Afternoon, we're the Donnelly family. Run a ranch about 20 miles east. Heard there was a couple living up here." Vance moved forward cautiously. "Elias Vance. This is my wife, Clara." The word wife still sent a small thrill through Clara every time he said it. "Robert Donnelly," the man said, dismounting. "This is my wife Sarah and our daughter Annie." Sarah Donnelly was in her late 30s, sturdy and capable looking. She smiled warmly at Clara. "We wanted to come introduce ourselves before winter set in, but the storms were too bad. Thought we'd take advantage of the break in the weather." They invited the Donnellys inside, and Sarah immediately started helping Clara prepare food while the men talked outside. "How are you managing up here?" Sarah asked, her voice kind but assessing. "We're managing." "First winter in the mountains?" "Yes. That's hard. I grew up in these mountains, and my first winter alone with Robert nearly broke me. Thought I was going to murder him at least 6 times. Clara laughed despite herself. "Only 6? Well, 6 times seriously, probably 50 times in passing." Sarah smiled. "It gets easier. You learn to give each other space, even in small quarters. You learn when to talk and when to shut up. And you learn that fighting doesn't mean failure." Morrison said something similar. "Morrison's a smart woman. You listen to her advice." They spent the afternoon in easy companionship. Sarah was easy to talk to, warm and funny, with none of the judgment Clara had grown used to in Black Hollow Pass. When the Donnellys prepared to leave, Sarah pulled Clara aside. "If you need anything, and I mean anything, you send word. We're neighbors now. That means something up here." "Thank you." Sarah hesitated, then said, "Can I give you some advice?" "Please." "Winter's going to test you in ways you can't imagine yet. You're going to get tired of his face. He's going to get tired of yours. You're going to say things you regret. But here's what I learned. The mountains don't care about your marriage. They'll kill you both if you're not working together. So when things get hard, remember that you're on the same team always." The words settled into Clara's chest like truth. After the Donnellys left, Vance and Clara stood together, watching them disappear down the valley. "She's nice," Clara said. "They're good people. Robert helped me build the smokehouse few years back. I'm glad we have neighbors." Vance put his arm around her. "Me too." That night marked a shift. Maybe it was the visit from the Donnellys, the reminder that they weren't completely alone in the world. Maybe it was just time finally catching up to commitment. When they went to bed, Vance climbed the ladder to the loft without asking. Clara helped him out of his heavy outer layers, her fingers fumbling with the buttons. He did the same for her, his hands careful and warm. They lay down together under the furs, still wearing most of their clothes, because the cold was brutal. "Clara," Vance said quietly. "Yeah? I want this to be a real marriage, all of it, but only when you're ready." Clara's heart hammered. "What if I'm scared?" "Then we go slow. We figure it out together." She rolled over to face him, their bodies close in the small bed. "I don't know what I'm doing." "Neither do I. Not with you. Every person is different." Emily was Emily. You're you. This is different. New. Clara reached up and touched his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw, the scar through his eyebrow, the shape of his mouth. Vance closed his eyes and leaned into her touch. "I love you," Clara whispered. His eyes opened. What? I love you. I don't know when it happened. Maybe the first day, maybe slowly over months, but I do. Vance's expression transformed. I love you too. Have for a while now. Why didn't you say anything? Didn't want to pressure you. Didn't want you to feel like you had to say it back. Clara pulled him closer and kissed him. Not chase this time. Real. Deep. Full of months of building tension and want and need. Vance made a sound low in his throat and kissed her back, his arms tightening around her. They made love for the first time that night, slow and fumbling, and nothing like the romance novels Clara had secretly read as a girl. It was awkward and strange and slightly uncomfortable, both of them trying to figure out what worked, what felt good, how their bodies fit together. But it was also tender. Vance was patient, careful, constantly checking that she was okay, and Clara felt something unlock inside her chest, a final barrier falling away. Afterward, they lay tangled together, breathless and sweaty despite the cold. You okay? Vance asked. Better than okay. He kissed her forehead. We'll get better at that. Clara laughed. I hope so. Practice makes perfect. Is that so? Definitely. They fell asleep wrapped around each other, and for the first time since arriving in the mountains, Clara felt completely, absolutely home. The warming spell ended 3 days later with a storm that made all previous storms look gentle. Clara woke to a sound she'd never heard before, a roar, like a freight train bearing down on the cabin. The walls shook. The shutters rattled so hard she thought they'd tear off. Elias. He was already up, dressed, moving to reinforce the door. Stay in the loft. What's happening? Wind. Bad wind. Just stay there. The storm hit with a force that was almost alive. Wind tore at the cabin, trying to find weaknesses, howling like 1,000 wolves. Snow drove against the walls with such velocity it sounded like gravel. The temperature plummeted. The cabin held but barely. They huddled together in the loft while the storm raged for 18 hours straight. At one point, part of the smokehouse roof tore away, the sound of splintering wood audible even over the wind. When it finally ended, they emerged to find the world transformed. Snow had drifted against the cabin so high it covered the windows. The smokehouse was damaged but standing. One of the storage sheds had collapsed completely, and in the stable, they found the milk cow dead, frozen solid. Vance stood staring at the dead animal, his face expressionless. Elias, Clara said softly, we needed that milk. I know. The chickens aren't producing because it's too cold. The cow's dead. That cuts our food supply significantly. Clara put her hand on his arm. We'll manage. Clara, we'll manage. We still have the goat. We have preserved vegetables and dried meat. We have each other. She squeezed his arm. We'll make it work. Vance looked at her and something in his expression cracked. Sometimes I forget you're tougher than me. I'm not tougher. I'm just stubborn. Despite everything, he smiled. Yeah, that too. They butchered the frozen cow and preserved what meat they could. It was brutal, exhausting work in the freezing cold, but by the end of the day they'd salvaged enough to see them through to spring. That night, sitting by the fire, Vance pulled Clara close. When I was alone up here, he said quietly, storms like that would break me for days. I'd sit here thinking about Emily, about how I failed her, about how maybe I deserved to be alone. Clara waited, knowing he needed to say this. But now, even when things go wrong, I don't feel that way, because you're here, because we're facing it together. That's what marriage is, Clara said, facing things together. Yeah, he kissed the top of her head. Yeah, it is. March came slowly, bringing slightly warmer temperatures, and the first hints that winter might actually end someday. One morning, Clara woke feeling strange, off. She couldn't quite identify what was wrong. Then she realized she'd missed her monthly bleeding. She sat up in bed, her heart suddenly racing. Missed bleeding meant one thing. She spent the day watching herself for other signs. Nausea, a little in the morning. Tenderness in her breasts, yes. Exhaustion. Hard to tell, given how exhausting daily life was anyway. but deep down she knew she was pregnant. That night after dinner, she told Vance. He went absolutely white. "You're sure?" "Pretty sure." He stood up abruptly and walked to the window, his back to her, his shoulders rigid. Clara's stomach sank. "Elias?" "I can't," his voice cracked. "I can't lose you like I lost Emily." "You won't." "You don't know that." He spun around, his face twisted with fear. "Emily was young and healthy, and the pregnancy killed her anyway. He stopped himself, but Clara heard what he didn't say. "You're older. You're having your first child late. The risks are higher." She stood and walked to him, taking his hands. They were shaking. "Look at me," she said. He did, reluctantly. "I'm not Emily. I'm stronger than she was. You said so yourself. And I'm not having this baby in Kansas with a doctor who doesn't know what he's doing. I'm having it here with you, and we're going to prepare better than anyone has ever prepared. Clara, listen to me. We have months. We'll get Sarah Donnelly to help. We'll make sure we have every supply we need. We'll do this right." She squeezed his hands. "But I need you to not fall apart on me. Can you do that?" Vance closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were wet. "I'm terrified. So am I. But you're not showing it. Someone has to be strong right now. Later you can be strong while I fall apart." He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight it almost hurt. "I can't lose you." "You won't, I promise." It was a promise she had no right to make, but she made it anyway. They told the Donnellys 3 weeks later, when the snow had finally melted enough to make the journey possible. Sarah took one look at Clara's face and knew before anyone said a word. "How far along?" she asked. "Maybe 6 weeks. Hard to tell exactly." Sarah pulled Clara into a fierce hug. "Congratulations, both of you." Robert clapped Vance on the shoulder, grinning. About time this valley had some new blood in it. But Sarah saw the fear in Vance's eyes, and after the men went outside to check on some fence repair, she sat Clara down at her kitchen table. "He's scared," Sarah said. It wasn't a question. Terrified. He lost his first wife in childbirth. Sarah nodded slowly. "I heard about that terrible thing, but Clara, you need to understand something. Childbirth is dangerous. It always has been, always will be. Women die. Babies die, sometimes both. That's just the reality of frontier life." Clara's throat tightened. "That's not helping." "I'm not trying to help. I'm trying to be honest." Sarah reached across the table and took Clara's hands. "But here's the other truth. Most women survive. Most babies survive, and you're strong, stronger than most women I know. You've made it through a Montana winter in the high country on your first try. That's no small thing. Elias thinks because I'm older. You're 24. That's not old. I had my first at 22, my second at 26, my third at 31. All 3 lived. I lived. It can be done." Clara felt tears burning behind her eyes. "What if something goes wrong?" "Then we deal with it, but you can't live your whole pregnancy in fear. That's not good for you or the baby." Sarah squeezed her hands. "Listen to me. I'm going to help you through this. I've delivered 6 babies in this valley, including my own 3. I know what I'm doing, and when your time comes, I'll be here." "You promise?" "I promise. Unless the weather is absolutely impossible, I'll be here." They spent the rest of the day going over everything Clara needed to know. What to eat, what to avoid, how to tell if something was wrong, what supplies to gather. Sarah wrote everything down in careful script, and Clara memorized every word. When they rode back to the cabin that evening, Vance was quiet. "You feel better?" he finally asked. "A little. Sarah knows what she's doing." "I know she does, but..." He stopped. "But nothing is guaranteed." "Yeah." Clara reached over and took his hand. "We're going to be okay, all 3 of us." Vance looked at her, and the naked vulnerability in his expression made her chest ache. "I want to believe that." "Then believe it." The pregnancy changed everything and nothing. Clara still worked. Sarah had been firm about that. Bed rest was for women with complications. Healthy women needed to stay active. So Clara hauled water, fed animals, split wood, and kept the cabin running. But her body was changing in ways that were both fascinating and terrifying. The nausea got worse before it got better. For 6 weeks, Clara spent every morning retching into a bucket, while Vance held her hair back and looked helpless. "Is this normal?" he kept asking. According to Sarah, yes. It seems like a lot. It's a lot. Her breast became so tender that even the weight of her dress hurt. Her sense of smell became absurdly acute. She could smell the stable from inside the cabin, could tell when Vance had been handling the furs before he even came through the door, and she was exhausted, bone-deep, overwhelming exhaustion that made her fall asleep sitting up sometimes. Vance watched her like a hawk, trying to help with everything until Clara finally snapped at him. "I'm pregnant, not dying. Stop hovering." "I'm not hovering. You're absolutely hovering. You won't let me carry water. You won't let me chop wood. Yesterday you tried to stop me from feeding the chickens. The chicken coop is icy. You could slip. I've been feeding those chickens for months. I know where the ice is." Vance's jaw tightened. "I'm trying to keep you safe. I know that, but I need you to trust me to know my own limits." They stared at each other across the cabin. "I can't lose you," Vance said quietly. Clara's anger drained away. She crossed to him and put her hands on his face. "Then help me stay strong. Let me work. Let me keep my body capable, because when the baby comes, I'm going to need every bit of strength I have." He closed his eyes and leaned his forehead against hers. Okay. I'll tell you if something feels wrong, I promise. And I'll try not to hover. Thank you." Spring arrived in fits and starts. Warm days followed by late snowstorms, the mountains slowly releasing winter's grip. One morning in early May, Clara woke to the sound of voices outside the cabin. She climbed down from the loft, more carefully now, her balance shifting as her belly grew, and found Vance at the door, rifle in hand. "Who is it?" she asked. "Don't know yet, but there's 3 of them." Clara grabbed the shotgun and stood beside him. 3 men emerged from the trees, leading exhausted horses. They were dirty, unshaven, and had the look of people who'd been traveling hard. The one in front raised his hand slowly. "We're not looking for trouble, just need a place to rest for a few hours." Vance didn't lower the rifle. "You're a long way from any trail. Got turned around in a storm few days back, been trying to find our way to the settlements. Where you coming from?" "Idaho, heading to Helena." Vance studied them for a long moment. Clara could see him assessing threat levels, reading body language, making calculations. "You can rest in the stable," he finally said. "I'll bring you food, but you don't come near the cabin and you're gone by sunset." "Clear?" "Crystal. Thank you." The men moved toward the stable and Vance closed the door. "You think they're telling the truth?" Clara asked. "Probably, but I don't trust probably." Clara made coffee and stew while Vance kept watch. He took the food to the stable himself, came back and spent the rest of the day cleaning weapons and watching the tree line. The men left before sunset as promised, thanking Vance and heading down valley. But that night, Clara woke to Vance sitting by the window, rifle across his knees. "You didn't believe them," she said. "One of them had a brand on his horse I recognized, stolen from a ranch near Butte 3 months ago." Clara sat up. "They were outlaws?" "Probably, but they were also desperate and heading away from here. Sometimes the smart play is to give desperate people what they want and send them on their way." "What if they come back?" "They won't. I made sure they knew I was armed and capable, and I watched them until they were out of rifle range." He turned to look at her. "Go back to sleep. We're safe." But Clara couldn't sleep. She lay in the loft thinking about how quickly safety could become danger, how the isolation that protected them also made them vulnerable. The next morning, Vance started teaching Clara to shoot properly. "You need to be able to defend yourself and the cabin when I'm on the trap lines," he said. They spent 3 days practicing with both the rifle and shotgun. Clara's shoulder bruised from the recoil, and her ears rang from the noise. But by the end, she could hit a target at 50 yards with the rifle and scattershot effectively with the shotgun. "Good," Vance said, watching her reload. "Now you're dangerous." Clara smiled grimly. That was always the plan. June brought heat that was almost shocking after the brutal winter. The snow melted completely, revealing the valley in shades of green Clara had never imagined. Wildflowers exploded across the meadows. The stream ran high and fast with snowmelt, and Clara's pregnancy became obvious. Her belly swelled until she could no longer see her feet. Her back ached constantly. She had to pee every 30 minutes, it seemed. And the baby moved, strange, fluttering sensations that gradually became actual kicks. The first time Vance felt the baby kick, he looked like he might cry. "That's real," he whispered, his hand on her belly. "Very real. It's strong. Takes after you." He looked up at her, and the fear was still there, but tempered now with something else. Hope, maybe. "I'm starting to believe we can do this," he said. "We can." Sarah Donnelly visited twice a month now, checking Clara's progress, answering questions, preparing them both for what was coming. "The baby's positioned well," she said during one visit. "Head down, good size, everything looks normal." "When do you think it'll come?" "Hard to say exactly. Late August, early September probably. First babies usually come late." After Sarah left, Clara and Vance spent the evening preparing the cabin. They set up a corner with clean blankets, hot water supplies, cloths, everything Sarah had said they'd need. "What if the baby comes when you're on the trap lines?" Clara asked. "I'm not going on the trap lines anymore, not until after the birth." "Elias, that's months of lost income." "I don't care about income. I care about being here when you need me." Clara wanted to argue, but the relief she felt was too strong. Okay. They fell into a new routine. Vance took over the heavier work, water hauling, wood splitting, anything that required significant strength. Clara handled the cooking, the animals, the garden they'd planted. In the evenings they sat together and Vance talked to Clara's belly, his voice soft, telling the baby about the mountains, about the life waiting. "You're going to love it here," he said one night, his hand on her stomach. "The snow in winter, the wildflowers in summer, the way the sunrise hits the peaks. Your mother's already the toughest person I know, so you're going to be unstoppable." Clara ran her fingers through his hair, overwhelmed with love for this man who'd been terrified and was choosing courage anyway. July brought new challenges. One afternoon, Clara was in the garden when a wave of dizziness hit her so hard she had to sit down. Her vision tunneled, her heart raced. "Clara?" Vance was beside her instantly. "What's wrong?" "Dizzy, really dizzy." He helped her inside, made her lie down, brought water. The dizziness passed, but it scared both of them. When Sarah came the next week, Clara described what had happened. Sarah's face grew serious. "How often has this happened?" "Just once." "Any swelling in your hands or feet?" Clara looked at her ankles. They were puffy. "Yes." Sarah checked Clara's pulse, looked at her eyes, felt her belly. "Your blood is running too hot. The baby's putting strain on your body." "Is that dangerous?" "It can be. You need to rest more. Lie down several times a day. Drink more water. No heavy work." After Sarah left, Vance was white-faced with fear. "It's fine," Clara said. Sarah said it's manageable. She said it can be dangerous. Can be, not is. But Vance wouldn't be reassured. He took over everything, leaving Clara with almost nothing to do. She spent her days resting, bored out of her mind, watching him work himself to exhaustion. "This is ridiculous," she finally said. "I'm not an invalid. You're at risk. I'm pregnant. There's always risk. But I can't just lie here for 2 months doing nothing." Sarah said to rest more, not to do nothing. Clara stood up, her back screaming in protest. "I'm going to feed the chickens. You can't stop me." Vance looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her expression must have convinced him she was serious. "Fine, but I'm coming with you. Whatever makes you feel better." They compromised. Clara did light work, cooking, feeding chickens, tending the garden. Vance did everything else. It wasn't perfect, but it was sustainable. August arrived with heat that made the cabin feel like an oven. Clara was huge now. her belly so large she couldn't sleep comfortably in any position. She was exhausted and uncomfortable and desperately ready for the pregnancy to be over. "How much longer?" she asked Sarah during a visit. "Could be days, could be weeks. First babies keep their own schedule." "That's not helpful." Sarah smiled. "I know, but your body will tell you when it's time." 3 days later, Clara woke at dawn with a pain low in her belly. Not terrible, just a cramping sensation that came and went. She lay there for a few minutes, tracking the pain. It came again and again, regular intervals. "Elias," she said quietly. He was awake instantly. "What's wrong?" "I think it's starting." Vance went pale. "Starting? You mean, I think I'm in labor?" He was out of bed and pulling on clothes before Clara could say anything else. "I need to get Sarah. How far apart are the pains?" "Maybe 10 minutes. That's early labor." Sarah said early labor can last hours, days even. He was talking fast, his hands shaking as he laced his boots. "I'll ride to their ranch, get Sarah, bring her back. It'll take maybe 4 hours total. You'll be okay until then." "I'll be fine." He kissed her hard. "Don't have the baby while I'm gone." "I'll try not to." He was out the door in seconds. Clara heard the horse leave at a gallop. Then she was alone. The pains continued, regular but not terrible. Clara got up, made coffee, tried to eat breakfast but couldn't. The contractions were getting stronger but still manageable. By midday they were 5 minutes apart and painful enough that she had to stop and breathe through them. By afternoon she was starting to worry. Where was Vance? He should have been back by now. The contractions kept coming, harder, closer together. Clara paced the cabin, breathing through the pain, trying not to panic. When the door finally opened 4 hours later, Sarah rushed in with Vance right behind her, both of them breathing hard. "How are you doing?" Sarah asked, immediately checking Clara. "It hurts." "I know, that's normal." "Let's see how far along you are." Sarah examined her and her face grew serious. "You're progressing fast, faster than I expected for a first baby." "What does that mean?" "It means this baby's coming sooner than I thought, probably tonight." Vance looked like he might pass out. Sarah took charge, setting up the birthing area, boiling water, laying out supplies. She sent Vance to fetch things, giving him tasks to keep him occupied. The afternoon blurred into evening, and the contractions became brutal. Clara had never experienced pain like this. Wave after wave of it, relentless, overwhelming. "I can't do this," she gasped between contractions. "Yes, you can," Sarah said firmly. "You're doing it right now. It's too much. I know it feels that way, but your body knows what to do. Just breathe through it." Vance held Clara's hand, his face white with fear, but his grip steady. "You're the strongest person I know," he said. "You can do this." Night fell. The cabin was hot despite the windows being open, the air thick and heavy. Clara was drenched in sweat, exhausted, and more pain than she'd known was possible. "I need to push," she finally gasped. "Not yet," Sarah said. "Wait for the next contraction." The next contraction came, and Clara pushed with everything she had. Nothing happened. She pushed again and again. Hours passed in a blur of pain and effort and fear. "Something's wrong," Vance said, his voice tight. "Nothing's wrong," Sarah said, but Clara could hear the strain in her voice. "The baby's just taking its time." But Clara knew something was wrong. She could feel it. The baby wasn't moving right. The pain was too much. Something was wrong. "Sarah," she gasped. I know. Sarah checked again, and her face went grim. "The baby's shoulder is caught. I need to turn it." "Will that hurt her?" Vance demanded. "It'll hurt, but it's necessary." What followed was the worst pain Clara had ever experienced. Sarah's hands inside her, pushing, turning, while Clara screamed. Then suddenly, miraculously, something shifted. "Now!" Sarah shouted. "Push now!" Clara pushed with the last of her strength, and the baby slid free. For one terrible moment there was silence. Then a thin, reedy cry filled the cabin. "It's a girl," Sarah said, her voice shaking with relief. "A healthy girl." She cleaned the baby quickly and placed her on Clara's chest. Clara looked down at the tiny, red-faced, screaming creature in her arms and started crying. Vance was crying too, his hand on the baby's head, his face transformed with wonder and relief. "She's perfect," he whispered. The baby had a full head of dark hair and Vance's grey eyes. She was tiny and loud and absolutely perfect. "What are you going to name her?" Sarah asked. Clara and Vance looked at each other. They'd discussed names but never settled on one. "Hope," Clara said. "Her name is Hope." Vance's eyes flooded with tears. "Hope. Yeah, that's perfect." Sarah stayed through the night, making sure both Clara and the baby were stable. By morning, she pronounced them both healthy. "You did good," she told Clara. "Both of you." After Sarah left, Clara and Vance lay in the loft together, Hope between them, tiny and sleeping. "I can't believe she's real," Vance said softly. "Very real." He touched Hope's tiny hand, and her fingers wrapped around his thumb. "She's so small. She'll grow." They lay there in silence, watching their daughter sleep, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they'd created. "Thank you," Vance said. "For what?" "For surviving. For being strong enough. For giving me this." Clara's throat tightened. "We did this together." "No, you did the hard part. I just held your hand. That's all I needed." The first weeks with Hope were brutal in an entirely different way than winter had been. The baby needed constant care, feeding every 2 hours, diaper changes, soothing when she cried, which was often. Clara was exhausted beyond anything she'd experienced. Her body ached from the birth. Her breasts hurt from nursing. She couldn't remember the last time she'd slept more than 90 minutes at a stretch. And Vance was terrified of everything. "Is she breathing?" "Yes, Elias." "Are you sure?" "She's so quiet." "She's sleeping, that's normal." 5 minutes later, "Is she too warm?" "She's fine. Her face looks red." Babies have red faces. Despite the exhaustion and fear, there were moments of perfect joy. Hope's first smile, probably just gas, but they pretended it was real. The way she gripped their fingers with surprising strength. The soft sounds she made when nursing. One night, Clara woke to find Vance sitting in the rocking chair he'd built, holding Hope against his chest, both of them asleep. The sight made her heart ache in the best way. This was her family, her home, her life. By October, they'd settled into a rhythm. Hope was bigger, stronger, sleeping longer stretches. Clara's body had healed, and Vance had stopped checking if the baby was breathing every 5 minutes. The leaves were turning gold and red in the valley. When the first snow of the season fell, Clara stood at the window, Hope in her arms, watching fat flakes drift down. Vance came up behind her and wrapped his arms around both of them. "Another winter," he said. "Yeah. You ready for it?" Clara thought about the woman she'd been a year ago, broken, invisible, certain she'd never matter to anyone. Then she looked at her husband and daughter, at the cabin they'd built into a home, at the life they'd created through sheer stubborn determination. "I'm ready," she said, and she was. The second winter came harder and faster than the first, as if the mountains wanted to test whether Clara had truly earned her place among the peaks. November brought storms that buried the cabin under snow so deep Vance had to dig a tunnel from the door to the stable. The temperature dropped to 50 below zero, cold enough that their breath froze instantly, that metal stuck to bare skin, that even thinking about going outside felt dangerous. But this time, Clara wasn't terrified. She was prepared. She'd learned to read the weather, to anticipate storm days before they hit. She knew how much wood they needed, how to ration supplies, how to keep the cabin warm through the endless frozen nights. And most importantly, she knew she could survive anything the mountains threw at her because she'd already done it once. Hope was 4 months old now, growing fast despite the brutal conditions. She was a quiet baby, watchful, with Vance's serious grey eyes, and a grip strong enough to make Clara wince when those tiny fingers grabbed her hair. "She's going to be tough," Vance said one evening, watching Hope try to hold her own head up. "Look at her, 4 months old and already fighting gravity." Clara smiled. She doesn't have a choice. This isn't exactly gentle country for raising children. You regret it? Bringing a baby into this? The question caught Clara off guard. She looked around the cabin, warm despite the cold outside, stocked with food they'd preserved together, filled with the sounds of their daughter and the quiet comfort of partnership. No, she said. I don't regret any of it. Vance crossed to her and kissed the top of her head. Good, because I don't either. The isolation of winter was different with a baby. Before, the quiet had sometimes felt oppressive. Now, the cabin was never truly silent. Hope made sounds. Little coos and grunts, occasional cries that pierced the stillness, the soft rhythm of her breathing while she slept. Clara found herself talking to the baby constantly, narrating everything she did. Now we're making bread. See, you mix the flour and water like this. One day you'll do this yourself. One day you'll do everything yourself, and I'll just be the old woman who taught you. Vance would listen and smile, occasionally adding his own commentary. Don't listen to your mother. You don't have to do everything yourself. That's what family is for. By December, they'd settled into a routine that felt almost normal. Clara handled most of Hope's care while Vance managed the heavy outdoor work. They shared cooking and cleaning. In the evenings, they'd sit by the fire, taking turns holding the baby, talking about small things and large dreams. I want to expand the cabin, Vance said one night. Add another room, maybe 2. Hope's going to need her own space as she gets older. That's years away. Time moves fast up here. Before you know it, she'll be walking, talking, getting into everything. Clara tried to imagine Hope as a toddler, a child, a young woman. It felt impossible. Right now, she was just this tiny creature who needed constant care. What else do you want to build? Clara asked. Vance's eyes got that distant look he had when he was planning. A better smokehouse, a root cellar dug deeper into the hillside, maybe a small barn for if we get more livestock, and he hesitated. What? A schoolroom. I want to build a schoolroom. Clara's throat tightened. You want to teach her? We both will. Reading, writing, arithmetic, history, everything we know. He looked at Clara. I don't want her to be ignorant just because we're isolated. She deserves an education. I barely had any schooling myself. Then we'll learn together. I've got books. We'll study at night, teach her during the day. The image he was painting, their daughter learning to read by firelight, all 3 of them bent over books together, made Clara's chest ache with want. Okay, she said, we'll build a schoolroom. Christmas came, their second together but the first as a family of 3. They had no decorations, no gifts, nothing traditional. But Vance surprised Clara by carving a small wooden rattle for Hope, sanded smooth and painted with berry juice. Clara had made him a new shirt from fabric she'd been hoarding, stitched carefully during Hope's nap times. They exchanged gifts awkwardly, both unused to such gestures. It's not much, Clara said. It's perfect, Vance replied, running his hands over the shirt. Thank you. That night they lay in the loft with Hope between them, and Vance told the baby about Christmases from his childhood. His voice was soft, nostalgic, painting pictures of a life he'd left behind decades ago. We had a tree as tall as the ceiling, he said, candles on every branch. My mother would make these cookies that tasted like heaven, and my father... He stopped. What about your father? Clara prompted gently. He died when I was 12, accident at the mill. After that, Christmases were different, quieter. My mother tried, but the joy had gone out of it. Vance touched Hope's tiny hand. I want her Christmases to be full of joy. Even up here, isolated from everything, I want her to know celebration and warmth. Then we'll make that happen, Clara said. January brought the drifter. Clara was inside with Hope when she heard the horses. Her heart jumped. Visitors in January were unheard of. Either someone was in serious trouble or serious trouble had found them. She grabbed the shotgun and moved to the window. A single rider approached, hunched against the cold, leading a limping horse. Even from a distance, Clara could see the man was in bad shape. Vance emerged from the stable, rifle ready. The man raised his hand slowly. "I need help. Horse threw a shoe and went lame. I've been walking for 2 days." "Where you headed?" Vance called. Helena got turned around in the storm. Clara watched from the window as Vance assessed the situation. The man looked genuine, exhausted, frostbitten, desperate. But after the incident with the thieves last year, they were both more cautious. "You can stable your horse," Vance said. "I'll bring you food, but you sleep in the stable and you're gone at first light." The man nodded gratefully. "Thank you. I won't cause trouble." Vance came inside to get supplies, his face grim. "What do you think?" Clara asked. "I think he's probably telling the truth, but I don't like the timing. Middle of January, middle of nowhere? Either he's the unluckiest traveler alive or something's not right. Want me to keep the shotgun loaded?" "Yeah, and keep Hope in the loft, just in case." Clara took the baby upstairs while Vance brought food to the stable. He was gone maybe 20 minutes, but it felt like hours. When he came back, his expression was troubled. "What's wrong?" Clara asked. "His name's Wade Mercer. Says he's a prospector, but he's asking too many questions about our supplies, our defenses, how often we get visitors." Clara's stomach tightened. "He's casing us." Maybe, or maybe he's just making conversation. Hard to tell. They spent a tense evening, Vance cleaning weapons, while Clara stayed in the loft with Hope. Around midnight, Clara heard movement outside. She crept to the window and looked down. Wade Mercer was outside the stable, walking the perimeter of the cabin, studying it. "Elias," she whispered. He was beside her in seconds, watching the man circle their home. "Son of a bitch," Vance muttered. "He's looking for weak points." "What do we do?" Vance grabbed his rifle and coat. "I'm going out there. Be careful." He kissed her quickly and went downstairs. Clara heard the door open and close. From the loft, she watched Vance approach Wade Mercer. Even from this distance, she could see the tension in both men's postures. Their voices carried in the cold air. Though Clara couldn't make out words, the conversation was brief. Then Wade Mercer raised his hands again and backed toward the stable. Vance stood outside the rest of the night, rifle across his knees, watching. Clara tried to sleep, but couldn't. She kept the shotgun beside her, one hand on Hope, listening to every sound. Dawn came slowly, the sky turning from black to grey. Clara watched as Wade Mercer emerged from the stable, saddled his limping horse, and rode away slowly. Vance watched him go until he disappeared into the trees. Then he came inside, his face drawn with exhaustion. "Is he gone?" Clara asked. "For now?" "You think he'll come back?" Vance set down the rifle and rubbed his face. "I don't know. He might, but I made it clear what would happen if he did." "What did you say to him?" "That I'm a very light sleeper with an excellent aim, and if he set foot on this property again, I'd put a bullet in him before he could explain himself." Clara should have been shocked by the casual violence in his words. Instead, she just felt relief. "Good," she said. That night, they had their first real argument since Hope was born. "We need to be more careful," Vance said. "No more letting strangers onto the property. He was dying of cold. What were we supposed to do? Let him freeze. Better him than us." Clara stared at him. "You don't mean that." "I absolutely mean that. Our priority is keeping this family safe, not helping every drifter who shows up asking for charity. So we just let people die? If that's what it takes to protect you and Hope?" "Yes." Clara felt anger rising hot in her chest. "That's not the man I married. The man you married knows that frontier justice is brutal and unforgiving. The man you married would do anything to keep his family alive. Even become the kind of person who lets people freeze to death." Vance's jaw tightened. "You think I like this? You think I want to be this way? But we're isolated up here. No law, no help, just us. And if I have to choose between being kind to strangers and keeping you safe, I choose you. Every single time." Clara opened her mouth to argue, then stopped, because he was right in a way. The mountains didn't care about morality. They only cared about survival. "I hate this," she said quietly. "I know. So do I." They stood on opposite sides of the cabin, the argument hanging between them. Finally, Clara crossed to him. "Promise me something." "What?" "Promise me we won't become so hard that we lose our humanity completely." Vance pulled her close. "I promise. We'll find the balance. We have to, for Hope." The incident with Wade Mercer changed something in both of them. They became more vigilant, more careful, more aware of how vulnerable they really were. Vance started taking Clara on patrol with him, teaching her to read tracks, to spot signs of intrusion, to think tactically about defense. "If someone comes when I'm gone," he said one day, "you don't be polite. You don't give them the benefit of the doubt. You stay inside, keep the shotgun ready, and you don't open the door for anyone you don't know. Understood? What if they really need help?" "What if?" "Then they'll understand why you're being cautious, and if they don't understand, that tells you everything you need to know." By February, Clara could identify tracks from 4 different animals, could tell how old prints were, could spot disturbed snow that indicated someone had been nearby. She was becoming what Vance had seen in her from the beginning, a true mountain woman, capable of protecting herself and her family. March brought the first hints of spring and an unexpected visitor. Sarah Donnelly arrived on a clear morning with news that made Clara's heart sink. "There's been an outbreak of scarlet fever in the valley," Sarah said. 3 children dead already. Robert and I are keeping Annie away from the settlements until it passes." Clara instinctively pulled Hope closer. "How close is it?" "The nearest case is maybe 30 miles away, but these things spread fast. I wanted to warn you." For the next 2 months, they kept Hope isolated even more carefully than usual. No trips to the Donnelly Ranch, no visitors, nothing that could potentially expose their daughter to the disease. The fear was constant and suffocating. Every time Hope coughed, Clara's heart would race. Every time she felt warm, Clara would check for fever with trembling hands. "This is what parenthood is," Sarah told her during one of her brief, carefully distanced visits. "Constant fear that something will take them from you. It never goes away. You just learn to live with it." By May, the outbreak had passed. No new cases in 6 weeks. The valley breathed a collective sigh of relief. Hope had survived another threat, growing bigger and stronger, completely unaware of how close danger had come. Summer arrived with warmth and wildflowers and a sense of renewal. Hope was nearly a year old now, sitting up on her own, babbling nonsense syllables that Clara and Vance pretended were words. One evening in late June, Sarah and Robert visited with news. "A family's moving into the valley," Robert said. "Young couple with a daughter about Annie's age. They're settling about 15 miles south of us." "More neighbors," Vance said. "That's good." "There's something else," Sarah added, glancing at her husband. "They're asking about schooling, wondering if there's enough children in the valley to start a small school." Clara's heart jumped. "How many children?" "Maybe 6 or 7 total, counting Hope when she's old enough. Not many, but enough to justify a teacher if we can find one willing to live out here." The conversation turned to possibilities, plans, dreams of bringing education to the remote valley. Clara listened with growing excitement. After the Donnellys left, she turned to Vance. "Do you think it could actually happen? Maybe the valley's growing, slowly but growing. Give it a few more years, we might have a real community up here." The idea was both thrilling and terrifying. Clara had grown used to the isolation, had built her identity around being tough enough to survive it. The thought of neighbors, community, social obligations, it felt foreign now. "Would you want that?" she asked Vance. "More people around?" He was quiet for a moment, thinking. 5 years ago, I would have said no. I came up here to get away from people, but now? He looked at Hope, sleeping in her cradle. Now I think about her growing up with other children, having friends, learning in a real school, and I think maybe I was wrong to run so far from civilization." "You weren't wrong, you were grieving." "Maybe, but I'm not grieving anymore." He pulled Clara close. "I'm living again, because of you." Hope's first birthday came in late August, celebrated with just the three of them, and a small cake Clara had somehow managed to bake without burning. The baby smashed her fist into the cake, getting frosting everywhere, and both parents laughed until they cried. "She's going to be trouble," Vance said, wiping frosting off Hope's face. "She's already trouble," Clara replied. "She takes after her father." "Hey now, I'm extremely well behaved. You're the most stubborn man I've ever met." "And you love me for it." Clara smiled. "Yeah, I really do." That night, after Hope was asleep, Clara and Vance sat on the porch watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "Do you ever think about Black Hollow Pass?" Vance asked. Clara hadn't thought about the settlement in months. It felt like something from another life, another person's memory. "Sometimes," she admitted, "I wonder if Mackenzie's still running that trading post, if those people still sit around mocking whoever's unfortunate enough to be there. You think they remember you?" "Probably not. I was invisible to them." Vance took her hand. "You were never invisible. They just refused to see you." Clara leaned her head on his shoulder. "I used to lie awake at night in that storage room, trying to imagine a future where I mattered to someone, where I had value beyond how much work I could do. I couldn't picture it. It seemed impossible. And now I know I matter. To you, to Hope, to Sarah and the Donnellys, to this life we've built." She squeezed his hand. "I found what I was looking for. I just didn't know it would be in the last place I expected." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. Two people who'd found each other against impossible odds and built something real, from nothing but determination and stubborn hope. Fall came, and with it, unexpected news. A rider arrived in late September with a letter from Judge Morrison. Clara opened it with trembling hands. The letter was brief and to the point. Terence Quill, the wagon boss who'd sold Clara into contract labor, had been arrested in Wyoming territory on multiple charges of fraud and human trafficking. He was going to prison for at least 20 years. "He can't hurt anyone else," Clara said, reading the letter again. "Good," Vance said. "Bastard deserves worse." Clara thought about the woman she'd been when Quill sold her contract to Mackenzie. Desperate, betrayed, trapped. That woman would have wanted revenge, would have celebrated Quill's downfall with bitter satisfaction. But the woman, Clara, was now felt only a distant relief that he couldn't victimize anyone else. "I'm not angry anymore," she realized aloud. "Why would you be? He did you a favor." Clara looked at Vance, surprised. "A favor? If he hadn't sold you to Mackenzie, you wouldn't have been in that trading post. I wouldn't have found you. None of this." He gestured at the cabin, at Hope playing on the floor. None of this would exist. Clara had never thought about it that way. The betrayal that had seemed like the worst moment of her life had actually been the doorway to the best parts of it. "That's a strange way to look at it," she said. "Maybe, but it's true. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead to the best things. We just can't see it at the time." That winter, their third together, was the easiest yet. They'd learned the rhythms of mountain survival so thoroughly, it had become second nature. The woodpile was massive, the food stores were full, the cabin was weather-tight and warm, and Hope was walking now, toddling around on unsteady legs, getting into everything, filling the cabin with chaos and joy. "She's going to be a handful," Sarah predicted during a January visit. "I can see it already. That girl's got opinions." It was true. Hope had developed a stubborn streak that made both parents laugh and groan in equal measure. She wanted what she wanted, and she let everyone know it. "Wonder where she gets that from," Vance said dryly after Hope's third tantrum in one afternoon. "Definitely from you," Clara replied. "Me, I'm easygoing." Clara raised an eyebrow. "You once spent 6 hours digging out the stable in a blizzard because you were too stubborn to wait for the storm to end." "That was different. The animals needed care. You're impossible, and you love me for it." Clara couldn't argue with that. Spring came early that year, the snow melting in March instead of April. One morning, Clara woke to the sound of running water, the stream, freed from ice, rushing past the cabin. She went outside and just stood there, feeling the sun on her face, listening to the water, watching green things push up through the wet earth. Hope toddled out after her, and Clara picked her up, pointing to the wildflowers just beginning to bloom. See those? They're called mountain laurel, and those are Indian paintbrush, and those, I don't know what those are called, but they're pretty. Hope touched the flowers with chubby fingers, fascinated. Vance joined them, wrapping his arms around them both. Beautiful, isn't it? Yeah, Clara said, it really is. They stood there together, a family of 3, watching spring reclaim the valley. In May, visitors arrived that Clara never expected to see again. She was hanging laundry when she heard horses, several of them. Her hand moved automatically to the rifle she now kept nearby, but then she recognized one of the riders, Judge Morrison. The judge dismounted with a grin. Clara Vance, you're looking well. Judge Morrison, what brings you up here? Official business and curiosity. Morrison looked around at the expanded cabin, the new outbuildings, the obvious signs of a thriving homestead. You've done well for yourself. We've worked hard. I can see that. Morrison paused. There's something you should know. I was in Black Hollow Pass last month. Mackenzie's trading post is closed. Went bankrupt. Clara felt a strange mixture of emotions. What happened? Turned out Mackenzie was running up debts all over the territory. When people started demanding payment, he couldn't cover it. Lost everything. Morrison smiled grimly. I made sure everyone knew about the contract fraud too. His reputation's destroyed. He'll never run a business again. Clara should have felt satisfaction. Instead, she just felt tired. Good, she said. He hurt a lot of people. He did, but not you. Not anymore. Morrison studied Clara carefully. You know what people are saying about you down in the settlements. I'm sure it's nothing good. Actually, it's quite good. They're calling you the toughest woman in the territory. The woman who survived Bitter Ridge. The woman who turned Elias Vance from a hermit into a family man. Clara laughed despite herself. That's ridiculous. Maybe, but it's what they're saying. Morrison glanced at Hope, who was peeking shyly from behind Clara's skirts. And who's this? This is Hope. She's almost 2. Morrison crouched down to Hope's level. Hello, Hope. You're a lucky girl. You've got good parents. After Morrison left, Clara told Vance what the judge had said. The toughest woman in the territory, Vance repeated, grinning. I could have told them that 2 years ago. Stop. It's true, you came up here with nothing. No skills, no experience, no idea what you were getting into. And you not only survived, you thrived. He pulled her close. I'm proud of you. Clara felt tears burning behind her eyes. I couldn't have done it without you. Yeah, you could have. You're stronger than you give yourself credit for. That summer, the Valley community came together to build a schoolhouse. It was a small building, just 1 room, but it was solid and well made. Clara and Vance contributed labor and materials. The Donnellys did the same. The new family, the Harpers, brought skills in carpentry. By August, the school was finished. The Valley now had 7 children of school age, ranging from 5 to 12. They hired a teacher, a young woman from Helena named Miss Peterson, who wanted adventure and wasn't afraid of isolation. On the first day of school, Clara watched from a distance as the children gathered. Hope was too young to attend yet, but someday she'd walk through those doors. You thinking about the future? Vance asked, joining her. Yeah, thinking about how different her life is going to be from mine. That's the goal, isn't it? Give our children better than what we had. Clara thought about her own childhood, the poverty, the hunger, the constant fear. Hope would never know those things. She'd grow up with education, community, parents who loved her. We did good, Clara said. We did. Fall came, painting the valley in gold and red. Hope turned 2 and started stringing words together into actual sentences. The cabin felt smaller now, bursting with life and energy. We need to expand, Clara said one evening. I know, I've been drawing up plans. He showed her sketches for 2 additional rooms, one for Hope, one for them. a proper bedroom for the first time since they'd married. "When do we start?" Clara asked. "Spring. Soon as the ground thaws." They spent the winter preparing, cutting timber, stockpiling materials, and this winter was different from all the others. This winter they had neighbors who checked on them. They had community dinners at the schoolhouse once a month. They had connection to the wider world. The isolation that had once defined their lives was slowly easing. "Do you miss it?" Clara asked Vance one night. "The solitude?" "Sometimes," he admitted. "But then I remember what solitude cost me. 8 years of my life, wasted in grief and isolation. I wouldn't trade what we have now for anything." Spring came, and with it news that would change everything. Sarah Donnelly arrived with her face flushed with excitement. "There's going to be a territorial fair in Helena this summer. They want representatives from all the frontier communities. Someone suggested the Bitter Ridge Valley send someone." "Who?" Clara asked. Sarah grinned. "You and Elias. People want to meet the famous mountain couple, the outlier who became a family man, and the woman who survived where everyone said she'd fail." Clara's stomach dropped. "I'm not going to Helena." "Why not?" "Because I don't need their approval. I don't need to perform for people who wouldn't have given me the time of day 3 years ago." But Vance surprised her. "Maybe we should go." Clara stared at him. "What?" "Not for them. For us. For Hope. Let her see a real town, meet other people, see that the world is bigger than just this valley." Clara wanted to argue, but she couldn't. He was right. In July they made the trip to Helena. The town was overwhelming after years in the mountains. The noise, the crowds, the smell. Clara found herself clutching Hope tight, her heart racing, but people recognized them, came up to talk, and instead of mockery, Clara heard respect. "You're Clara Vance? I heard you fought off a mountain lion. Is it true you survived a winter at 50 below? They say you can shoot a rifle better than most men." The attention was uncomfortable, but Clara realized something important. These people saw her as strong, capable, admirable. The exact opposite of how she'd been seen in Black Hollow Pass. She'd changed. Or maybe she'd always been this person, and she just needed someone to see it. At the fair, they ran into someone Clara never expected to see again. Rebecca Sharp, the pretty blonde girl from Mackenzie's trading post. She looked older now, harder, her dress worn and her face lined with stress. Rebecca's eyes widened when she saw Clara. "Clara Whitmore?" "Clara Vance," Clara corrected. Rebecca's gaze traveled from Clara to Vance to Hope, her expression unreadable. "You actually stayed up there. We all thought you'd be back in a week." "I know what you thought." There was a long, awkward pause. "You look good," Rebecca finally said. "Happy." "I am." "I'm glad Rebecca hesitated. "I'm sorry for how we treated you back then. It was cruel." Clara could have held on to the anger, could have thrown Rebecca's apology back in her face. But what was the point? "It's over," Clara said. "I'm not that person anymore." Rebecca nodded, relief evident on her face, and walked away. Vance squeezed Clara's hand. "That was generous of you. I'm trying to be better than my anger." They spent 2 days in Helena, then gladly returned to the mountains. The valley felt like home in a way the town never could. The quiet, the space, the familiar peaks rising against the sky. "I'm glad we went," Clara said as they rode up the valley. "But I'm gladder to be home." "Me too." That fall, they began construction on the new rooms. By the time the first snow fell, the cabin had doubled in size. Hope had her own bedroom now, decorated with curtains Clara had sewn, and a rocking horse Vance had carved. Clara and Vance had a proper bedroom with a real bed and a door they could close. It felt like luxury after years of sharing the loft. Winter came again, but this time there was no fear, no uncertainty. Just the comfortable routine of a family that knew how to survive together. One evening in late December, with snow falling outside and Hope asleep in her room, Clara and Vance sat by the fire. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't walked into that trading post?" Clara asked. Sometimes I'd probably still be alone up here, slowly turning into a ghost, and I'd probably still be scrubbing pots for Mackenzie, or dead, or married to some man who saw me as nothing but labor. Vance pulled her close. We saved each other. Yeah, Clara said, I think we did. She thought about the woman she'd been 3 years ago, invisible, worthless in everyone's eyes, including her own. That woman couldn't have imagined this life, but that woman also had a core of steel she didn't know existed, a stubbornness that refused to break, a strength that just needed someone to see it and call it out. Vance had seen it, and in seeing it, he'd helped Clara see it too. I love you, Clara said. I love you too. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the wind outside and the crackle of the fire and the soft sounds of their daughter sleeping safely in the next room. Spring came again, as it always did. The snow melted, the wildflowers bloomed, life renewed itself in the valley. Hope was 3 now, talking constantly, asking endless questions, getting into everything. She had Vance's stubborn determination and Clara's refusal to give up. She's going to be trouble when she's older, Sarah predicted during a visit. She's trouble now, Clara said fondly. One afternoon in May, Clara was working in the garden when she heard Hope shriek with delight. She looked up to find the little girl had discovered a patch of wildflowers and was picking them with chubby, determined hands. Vance came out of the stable and joined them, settling on the ground beside Hope. Pretty flowers, Hope announced, shoving a handful at her father. Very pretty, Vance agreed solemnly. Just like your mama. Hope looked at Clara critically. Mama's not a flower. No, but she's pretty. Mama's strong. Vance laughed. That too. Mama's strong and pretty and the toughest person I know. Hope seemed satisfied with this assessment and went back to picking flowers. Clara watched her husband and daughter together, her chest tight with emotion. This was what happiness looked like, not perfect, not easy, but real. By summer, the valley had grown enough to support a small general store. No more trips all the way to Helena for supplies. The isolation was ending, slowly replaced by community. Some might have mourned that change, but Clara welcomed it. She'd proven she could survive alone. Now she wanted to thrive together. In August, Judge Morrison visited one last time. I'm retiring, she announced, moving to California to live with my daughter, but I wanted to check on you first. They sat on the porch drinking coffee while Hope played nearby. You did good, Morrison said, looking around at the expanded cabin, the thriving homestead, the happy family. Better than good, you built something real up here. We got lucky, Clara said. Luck had nothing to do with it. You two worked your asses off and refused to quit. Morrison smiled. That's not luck, that's character. After Morrison left, Clara thought about those words. Character, not luck, not fate. Just 2 broken people who chose to keep trying until they weren't broken anymore. Fall came, and with it Clara's realization that she was pregnant again. She told Vance one evening after Hope was asleep. He went white. Are you sure? Pretty sure. This time, the fear in his eyes lasted only a moment before being replaced by something else. Determination, trust. We can do this, he said. I know. You're strong. We're prepared. Sarah's here. We've done this before. I know, Clara repeated, smiling. He pulled her close. I'm scared, but I'm also excited. Me too. The pregnancy was easier than the first. Clara knew what to expect. Her body was stronger, and she wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone anymore. The baby came in late April, another girl they named Grace. The birth was hard but manageable. Sarah was there. Vance held Clara's hand. And when Grace emerged screaming into the world, Clara felt only gratitude. 2 daughters, a husband, a home, a life she'd built from absolutely nothing. Hope adored her baby sister immediately, wanting to help with everything, constantly trying to hold the baby or bring her toys. Gentle, Clara would remind her. She's very small. I was small once, Hope announced with the confidence of a 3-year-old. You were. Not anymore. The years flowed past, marked by seasons and growth and small moments that accumulated into a life. Hope started school. Grace learned to walk. The valley continued to grow. More families moved in. The school expanded. A small church was built, though Clara and Vance rarely attended. They'd found their own faith in each other, in hard work, in the simple truth that family was what you built, not what you were born into. By the time Hope was 10 and Grace was 7, the valley had become a real community. There were 20 families now, a proper town starting to form at the valley's entrance. Some people talked about incorporating, making it official. Bitter Ridge Valley, Montana Territory. Clara and Vance watched the changes with mixed feelings. The wilderness they'd loved was slowly being tamed, but their daughters would have opportunities they never had. Education, community, safety. One evening, Clara found Vance on the porch, staring out at the valley. "Thinking about the old days?" she asked. "Yeah, remembering what this place was like when it was just me, just silence and cold and nothing but survival. You miss it? Not even a little bit." He pulled her close. "This is better. This is what I should have been looking for all along." Clara thought about the journey that had brought them here, her betrayal and desperation, his grief and isolation, the unlikely moment in a trading post when two broken people recognized something in each other worth saving. "We've come a long way," she said. "We have, and we're not done yet." Years later, when people would ask Clara about her life, and they often did because her story had become something of a legend in Montana Territory, she would always tell them the same thing. She'd been invisible once, worthless in everyone's eyes, including her own. People had looked at her and seen nothing but a burden, a joke, someone who didn't matter. But one person had looked at her and seen strength, potential, worth. And that had made all the difference. "I didn't need everyone to see me," Clara would say. "I just needed one person, the right person, someone who saw what I could be and believed in it before I did." She'd found that person in the last place she expected, a feared mountain man in a remote trading post during the worst winter of her life, and together they'd built something that lasted. Not a fairy tale, not a romance novel, just a real partnership between two stubborn, imperfect people who refused to give up on each other or themselves. That was the lesson Clara carried with her, and the one she'd pass on to her daughters. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need everyone's approval. You just need to be strong enough to keep trying, brave enough to take chances, and wise enough to recognize when someone sees your worth even when you can't see it yourself. The woman everyone ignored had become a legend, but more importantly, she'd become exactly who she was always meant to be, a survivor, a mother, a partner, a woman who mattered, and that was enough.